Chapter 708. Tang Zheng looked at the three-clawed golden dragon in his glabella. It was vivid and lifelike, as if it was really alive. The third stage of the dragon god technique, I really did it. Tang Zheng excitedly waved his fist. The ninth grade of Anidia really had an extraordinary effect, breaking through the third stage of the dragon god technique so easily. Ha! If the five-clawed golden dragon knew about this, it would definitely be shocked. It had always vowed that the dragon god technique was very difficult to cultivate, but ever since I started cultivating the first layer, it has been a lot easier for me. He looked up and saw the stairs leading to the third floor of the Langya pavilion in front of him. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile, and he walked up. Creak. His feet landed on the stairs, making a slight sound, but he was not ejected out of the Langya pavilion by the mysterious force like before. He breathed a sigh of relief and strode up to the third floor. Just as he stepped into the third floor, a murderous aura hit him in the face. This was not a murderous aura, but a murderous aura that filled the sky. It was so dense that it could not be dispersed, like water, and he was like a fish in the water. His smile immediately disappeared, and his brows furrowed. Such a strong murderous aura was definitely not a good sign. What exactly was so dangerous about the third floor? He cautiously looked over, and his pupils instantly dilated. This floor was not like the first two floors, which were filled with an antique and scholarly atmosphere. This floor was like a huge display stage. Not only were the four walls filled with a dazzling array of items, there were also many items on the shelves on the ground. His breathing involuntarily quickened, and he muttered to himself, I knew that the Langya pavilion would definitely have these good things. Sure enough, treasures, these are all treasures. This entire floor was filled with treasures. Sabers, spears, swords, and halberds were the most common weapons. There were also many strange weapons, dazzling the eyes. However, this time, he didn't come for the weapon, but for the oracle bone. Oracle bone, where are you? Don't be on the floors above. If that's the case, I won't be able to do anything. He muttered to himself endlessly and started searching the floors. When his gaze swept past the weapons one by one, he could not help but feel his emotions fluctuate because these weapons were not ordinary weapons, but magic treasures. The first thing that caught his eye was the outermost yellow-gray transcendent artifact. This was the most basic transcendent artifact. If Tang Zheng had just started cultivating, of course he would be very fond of it. Now, he was no longer the same as before, and yellow-grade transcendent artifacts were nothing in his eyes. As he walked forward, a profound grade transcendent artifact came into view, and he couldn't help but nod. Although he didn't need it, there were too many people around him, and there was bound to be someone who needed it. Further ahead were the earth-grade magic treasures. The number was much less than the previous magic treasures, only 5 in total. However, in Tang Zheng's eyes, these 5 magic treasures were not simple. They were definitely the best of the earth-grade magic treasures. In the future, after refining them, they could also be upgraded to heaven-grade magic treasures. He suppressed the joy in his heart and went to the center of the floor. There were 3 antique shelves, but the shelves were covered with something, so he couldn't see what was inside. Could there be a heaven-ranked magic treasure inside? Tang Zheng muttered to himself as Xin Shou lifted up a cover. Shwa! A multicolored light shone out, illuminating the entire floor. It was like a rainbow, gorgeous and beautiful. Wow! Even though Tang Zheng was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, because it was really too beautiful. A multicolored ribbon quietly appeared in front of him. Upon closer inspection, the ribbon was floating about a finger's width away from the shelves. Heaven-grade magic treasure. Tang Zheng cried out in surprise. Although he couldn't see what was so magical about this magic treasure, the power and aura it emitted still allowed Tang Zheng to make an accurate judgment. He carefully picked up the magic treasure, and a cool feeling spread from his palm to his whole body. It was as if he drank a bottle of ice water on a hot summer day, making him feel relaxed and happy. However, a few other large words appeared in his mind at the same time: rainbow damask. This heaven-grade magic treasure is called rainbow damask. It's obviously more suitable for women. Tang Zheng already had many women by his side. Martial was a martial artist, and she cultivated the Inferno Divine Palm. Moreover, her martial arts were extremely masculine, completely different from the rainbow damask's feminine. Yi Ding Dang. When he thought of her, Tang Zheng's mood couldn't help but become gloomy. Before leaving Huaxia, the two of them had a conflict because of Princess Anne. Moreover, looking at Yi Dingdang's appearance, the situation this time was especially serious. Fang Shishir. Tang Zheng's head went soft. She was alone abroad, and he didn't know how she was doing. Moreover, other than the gold jade purple robe that he gave her, she didn't have any other suitable magic weapons. The cultivation method she cultivated was the cloud water art, which was graceful and agile, not feminine. The rainbow damask was very suitable for her. He nodded. Then this heaven-grade magic treasure would belong to Fang Shishir. He put the rainbow damask into his sumuru pouch, and casually opened the other cover. Shwa! A sharp sword light soared into the sky, as if it wanted to break through Langya Pavilion. Eh! Tang Zheng's gaze trembled as he looked at the magic treasure in surprise. It was a 3-foot-long sword with a translucent dark green body. It was sparkling and translucent, as if the green of the Buddha forest had been completely absorbed into the sword. However, it also emitted a powerful sword intent. Good sword. Tang Zheng couldn't help but praise. If he didn't already have the War Soul sword, he probably wouldn't have been able to resist using this sword as his own. Moreover, it was also a heaven-grade magic treasure. Clear Wind Sword. When Tang Zheng held the sword hilt with both hands, the name of the sword jumped into his mind. Moreover, this sword had another characteristic that made Tang Zheng startled. This sword seemed to have no weight at all. It was light as a feather, as if he was holding air in his hand. What a gentle sword name, but this sword isn't gentle at all. It's definitely a killing weapon. Tang Zheng exclaimed. In his heart, a person involuntarily jumped out, Yi Dingdang. I've already passed the wind-chasing sword art to Dingdang. The wind-chasing sword art is fast, fierce, and accurate. It has high requirements for the sword. If the sword is light and thin, and can cut through even the slightest hair, then when used together with the wind-chasing sword art, it will definitely display an even stronger power. Tang Zheng's eyes were filled with joy. The clear wind sword and the wind-chasing sword art were a perfect match. Moreover, both had the word, wind, in their names. It was like a match made in heaven. Although Yi Dingdang was a martial artist and the clear wind sword was a magic treasure, magic treasures could also be used as normal weapons. It was just a bit wasteful. However, because Yi Dingdang practiced the wind-chasing sword art, she didn't need inner strength to control the sword. She only needed to rely on the exquisite sword moves, which was a perfect match for the clear wind sword. I'll give this clear wind sword to Dingdang. I hope she likes it. He didn't hesitate to make a decision and put away the clear wind sword. Finally, his gaze fell on the third cover. As for what was inside, he had no idea. He didn't rush to open it. His heart was a bit nervous. He had already searched all the other places on this floor. This was the only place left. If it wasn't an oracle bone, then this trip would be a waste of time. He didn't think that he would be able to reach the 4th stage of the Dragon God technique in a short period of time. This was related to Gue Qiansui's injury. It was related to where Wu Junshan and the others would go next. In short, this matter was very important. He took a deep breath and carefully lifted the cover. At this moment, his heart stopped beating. His eyes stared straight at it. There was no dazzling rainbow light, no sharp sword chi. There was only a black thing the size of a palm. It was engraved with veined patterns. What is this? Tang Zheng's face revealed a look of suspicion, as the appearance of this item was not that great. It could not be compared to the 7-colored silk or the clear wind sword, but since it was placed here so solemnly, then it was definitely not trash. He picked up the thing. There was no reaction. The name of this thing did not appear in his mind. What the hell is this thing? Tang Zheng looked at it over and over again. For a long time, he didn't get a specific answer. The veined patterns engraved on it were very complicated. It was like a small tadpole. It looked like words, but it didn't look like words. Tang Zheng had never seen such a strange thing. After searching all the places, he still couldn't find the oracle bone. He couldn't help but feel dispirited and disappointed. God, are you playing with me? You gave me hope, and then instantly made me despair. You can't play with people like this. Tang Zheng waved his fist above his head and angrily roared. The voice hovered above his head for a while and then disappeared. Only Tang Zheng and the weapons in the room were left. Well, since it's like this, I can only think of another way. Tang Zheng casually threw the black thing into the sumaru pouch, and then strode downstairs. He didn't put the other weapons into the pouch. Because now he was surrounded by warriors, he didn't need these magic weapons for the time being. Tang Zheng slowly opened his eyes. Gui Qiansui hurriedly crawled over and couldn't wait to ask, Upper Immortal, how's the situation? Tang Zheng's expression dimmed as he said, I entered the Langia Pavilion, but there are many floors in the Langia Pavilion and my cultivation can only reach the 3rd floor. I didn't find the oracle bone, maybe the oracle bone is on a higher floor. Gui Qiansui heard this, and the expectation in his eyes immediately disappeared. It was replaced by disappointment and loss. Gui Qiansui, I'm sorry. I couldn't help you. Tang Zheng apologized. Gui Qiansui raised his head and said, Upper Immortal, you're too kind. It's my great honor to find the oracle bone in Langia Pavilion for me. Even if I die, I'm already satisfied. Moreover, this injury won't take my life. I just need more time to recover. But I'm really useless if I delay Upper Immortal's important matter. Gui Qiansui not only didn't blame him, but also kept blaming himself. Tang Zheng quickly said, Gui Qiansui, don't worry. I'll practice hard and strive to reach the higher floor of Langia Pavilion as soon as possible to find the oracle bone for you. Upper Immortal, Langia Pavilion is an important place of the Dragon Clan. You can go in and out freely. Moreover, a golden dragon appeared on your forehead just now. This situation has never happened before. It's a great opportunity for Upper Immortal. Gui Qiansui praised, but you'd better not let others know about this situation. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that others won't covet it. Tang Zheng was moved and nodded. He admitted that Gui Qiansui's reminder was very reasonable. Chapter 709. Tang Zheng remembered his harvest in Langia Pavilion, but he didn't know what that black thing was, so he took it out and asked Gui Qiansui, what do you think this is? That thing flew to Gui Qiansui and stared at it with its small eyes. It touched it with its claws and said, this, for a moment, it was a little sluggish. Tang Zheng was startled and asked curiously, what's wrong? Gui Qiansui raised his head and looked at Tang Zheng with a strange expression, Immortal, isn't this an oracle bone? What? Tang Zheng was shocked and almost jumped up, it's different from what you described. The oracle bone described by Gui Qiansui was not black like this, and there were turtle shell patterns on it, but there were no turtle shell patterns on it except for the scribbles. So, Tang Zheng thought for a long time, but still didn't recognize it as the oracle bone he was looking for. Gui Qiansui said, I'm just talking about an ordinary oracle bone, but this is not an ordinary one, so you didn't recognize it. In fact, if I didn't touch it, I wouldn't recognize it at a glance. The oracle bone is the shell of the turtle clan, and it has the unique aura of our turtle clan. When I touched it, I could feel this aura. As for the uniqueness of this turtle shell, it has been refined by someone. Refined before? Tang Zheng suspiciously creased his eyebrows. Gui Qiansui nodded, yes, the turtle's shell is very hard and can be used for defense. Some turtle shells can be refined into magic weapons, and this is one of them. You mean this is a magic weapon? Tang Zheng asked in surprise. he didn't feel any special aura from it, so he didn't think of it as a magic weapon. Gue Qiansui nodded. Of course, this is a heaven-level defensive magic weapon. Immortal, you can infuse your true qi into it, and everything will be clear. Hearing this, Tang Zheng put the oracle bone in his hand and infused his true qi into it. Whoosh! A ray of black light gushed out from the oracle bone, forming a shield. Tang Zheng's eyes lit up and was surprised. It's really a heaven-level magic weapon. When he infused his true qi into it, he could finally feel the power of the oracle bone. However, this magic weapon didn't have a name like the other two magic weapons. Immortal, you don't have a defensive magic weapon, this oracle bone is suitable for you, you can name it first. Gue Qiansui said. Isn't the oracle bone to heal your injuries? Healing won't damage the oracle bone, after I use it is still a heaven-level magic weapon. Tang Zheng suddenly realized that he had misunderstood and thought that after healing, the oracle bone would lose its use. The more he looked at it, the more he liked it. It was more and more. Now, he had the heaven-shocking bow, shooting sun arrows, battle soul sword, dragon-trapped rope, and 9 revolving pill furnace. Among them, the dragon-trapped rope could occasionally be turned into a shield and used as a defensive magic weapon, but after all, it was not a true defensive magic weapon, and its defensive power was not strong. If he had a magic weapon with strong defensive power, his overall strength would definitely have a qualitative leap. Tang Zheng's thoughts fluctuated as he played with the oracle bone. Since the oracle bone is the sacred object of your turtle clan, then let's call it Sacred Armor Shield. Sacred Armor Shield, good name. This matter should not be delayed, use it to heal first. Tang Zheng impatiently urged. Yes, Immortal, please wait for a moment. With the oracle bone, Gue Qiansui was full of confidence and spirit. The oracle bone flew into the air and flew above Gue Qiansui's head. Suddenly, a ray of light shot out from Gue Qiansui's back and directly hit the oracle bone. The oracle bone buzzed and shook, then a ray of black light fell and merged with the light on Gue Qiansui's back and fell on his turtle shell. In an instant, Gue Qiansui was wrapped by the black light, and Tang Zheng could not see what was happening. He silently stood by the side and stared at Gue Qiansui. At this time, Marshall quietly walked in from the outside. When she saw this scene, she was surprised and asked, "What is going on?" "Gue Qiansui is healing. It won't be long before we can leave this place," Tang Zheng said excitedly. Marshall was slightly startled and said with a complicated expression, "That's great." In fact, Marshall's heart was filled with mixed feelings. These few days, although they were in a foreign country and could be in danger at any time, but it was her happiest days. Tang Zheng spent most of his time with her. Moreover, ever since that intimate hug on the balcony that day and the mutual confession of their hearts had come together. They had a tacit understanding and were very sweet. Deep in Marshall's heart, she did not want this perfect state to be broken. She knew that once she left this place, Tang Zheng would not completely belong to her. Yi Dingdang, Fang Shishir, Lu Qingmei, and even Princess Anne, and perhaps more women would flock to Tang Zheng, then she would not be able to monopolize him. She did not feel it before, but now she faintly felt sour, but she had been silently burying this feeling in the bottom of her heart. However, she also knew that this was completely her wishful thinking, and was not realistic at all. Tang Zheng would leave this place sooner or later and return to Huaxia, but she did not expect this day to come so soon. Tang Zheng looked at her deeply and noticed the strangeness between her eyebrows. His heart moved as he held her hand and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Marshall squeezed out a smile and clasped his hand, saying, "Nothing, I'm happy to hear this news." Tang Zheng did not think too much about it and said, "All of this depends on Gue Qiansui, but I don't know how long it will take for it to heal." Marshall also glanced at Gue Qiansui, who was enveloped in light, and said absent-mindedly, "It doesn't matter how long we wait." "Oh right, are you coming back to Huaxia with me this time, or are you staying on the island?" Tang Zheng asked. Marshall's expression panicked. She did not know how her master and mistress would arrange for her. She could not help but feel a little scared and said, "I don't know either." This is your choice. She hesitated for a moment, then said, I want to go back to Huaxia with you. Tang Zheng's mouth hooked up into a smile. He gently wrapped his arms around her waist and said with a mischievous smile, Is it because you can't bear to part with me? Marshall was a little embarrassed. These days when Tang Zheng had nothing to do, he would smile mischievously and move his hands and feet. He was like an irritable little monkey, which often made Marshall feel shy. In the past, the relationship between the two of them was too rigid. Now, they were like a couple in love. Occasionally, their intimate actions made Marshall's heart beat faster. She was even more excited than when they were intimate. Nonsense. Marshall rolled her eyes at him. Tang Zheng's mood was very good. He smiled and said, There are no outsiders here. What are you afraid of? It doesn't matter if you tell the truth. Marshall subconsciously looked at Gui Qiansui. It is healing. It can't hear. Tang Zheng said. Humph, I won't say. Master and mistress have been waiting for your news. Since Gui Qiansui's injury is almost healed, I will immediately tell them the good news. After that, her figure flashed and escaped from Tang Zheng's devil claw. Tang Zheng shook his head and gave a knowing smile. A day and a night passed. The light that wrapped around Gui Qiansui dissipated. Gui Qiansui finished healing. There were no scars on his back. He was full of energy again. He excitedly said, Immortal, the oracle bone contains my turtle clan's spiritual energy. It is this spiritual energy that helped me to heal quickly. Tang Zheng faintly smiled and glanced at the oracle bone. There were no changes, so he casually put it away and said, Since it is like this, a long night is full of dreams. We will immediately depart. Yes. Gui Qiansui excitedly shook his head. This group of people went out of the house and went straight to the sea. Everyone was very excited. They were finally going to leave this damned place. They almost lost their lives. Moreover, some of their companions were sacrificed. However, in the end, they turned this country upside down. It could be considered as a temporary release of their anger. This area was very desolate. When they arrived at the seaside, they did not meet anyone. The sea was just under their feet. Tang Zheng nodded to Gui Qiansui. Gui Qiansui immediately climbed into the water. When it was immersed in the water, its speed was significantly faster. It was completely submerged by the sea. Gui Qiansui stopped, turned around and opened his mouth. A bubble came out of his mouth. This bubble was getting bigger and bigger. Finally, it became the size of a room, enough to accommodate dozens of people. If we enter the bubble, we can dive to the bottom of the sea. In this way, the enemy will not find us easily. Tang Zheng did not think that the enemy would only intercept them at the port and the airport. He was afraid that the Maritime Self-Defense Force would also be arranged to patrol the sea. They would not let them go easily. When they were at the bottom of the lake, they experienced the mystery of the bubble. So, they entered the bubble. The bubble quickly sank to the bottom of the sea. There was no trace of them on the surface of the sea. Gui Qiansui took the lead and led the way. The bubble automatically followed his footsteps. Everyone opened their eyes wide and looked at the world under the sea in amazement. This kind of treatment was not common. They should seize the time to enjoy the beautiful scenery of the sea. The bottom of the sea was really beautiful. Countless kinds of fish swam from both sides of the bubble. Some of them curiously looked around, looking at the strange big bubble and the people inside. Wu opened his eyes wide and looked around. His face showed a surprised expression. Wu Junshan and Lan Yu looked at each other. Both of them showed a gratified expression. All of this was due to their son's credit. The so-called, the student surpasses the master. Qiansui Gui and Bubble were not slow. They had already drifted far away from the coast and arrived at the deep sea. The surrounding scenery was more colorful, and there were many huge fishes swimming by on both sides. It was a sight to behold. Chapter 710. Seeing Gue Qiansui stop, everyone's nerves tightened. Tang Zheng quickly asked, "What's wrong?" "We encountered an enemy." "Enemy?" Everyone was surprised. They were in the deep sea, how could they encounter an enemy? However, everyone quickly understood what was going on. They saw a huge black object flying over from afar. Submarine. Everyone suddenly realized that the island nation had not only intercepted and investigated in the sea and the air, but also deployed a submarine at the bottom of the sea. Tang Zheng and the others thought that they were undetected, but they accidentally ran into the enemy's encirclement. Many people's complexions suddenly changed. They were in the deep sea and not on land. Submarines were undoubtedly the overlords of the sea. Although they were strong individually, they could not use their skills in the sea. Gue Qiansui seemed to know what everyone was thinking. He stood in front of the bubble and said, "Don't panic. So what if it's a submarine? They can't do whatever they want in the sea." Tang Zheng smiled and comforted them, "Don't worry, everyone. Gue Qiansui has his own countermeasures." Seeing that Tang Zheng was so confident, everyone temporarily relaxed and returned to their stomachs as they stared ahead without blinking. The submarine had already approached. Compared to such a huge object, Tang Zheng and the others were like weak little dots that could not withstand the wind. They would be easily smashed into pieces. Moreover, the enemy would not choose a head-on collision. Because, with a burst of snow-white water, 2 torpedoes were shot out directly, drawing a white line in the water. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, unable to take their eyes off this scene. Suddenly, Gue Qiansui's body lit up with a burst of light. With a bang, the light shone and the sea rolled. The explosion of the torpedoes was completely blocked by the light. When the light dissipated, a behemoth appeared in front of them. It was Gue Qiansui. His body was comparable to the submarine. He kicked his 4 legs and turned into a white line, rushing to the submarine. Bang! With a loud bang, a pit and a crack appeared on the submarine, and the submarine sank to the bottom of the sea. "Wow!" everyone exclaimed. On land, they didn't have a deep understanding of Qiansui's power, but in the sea, his attack power increased by 100 times. "Be careful." All of a sudden, the sound of Tang Zheng's footsteps rang out. A missile silently shot over from another direction. There were also other submarines. Gue Qiansui nimbly turned his body, and the seawater tumbled, forming a tall water wall in an instant. The missile hit the water wall and exploded, but the huge shock wave did not make Gue Qiansui move an inch. "You want to play hide and seek with me? Let's see how you can hide in this sea," Gue Qiansui said angrily. The opponent seemed to have discovered Gue Qiansui's strength, so he didn't rush forward recklessly. Instead, he chose to attack from a distance in order to play to his advantage. Gue Qiansui immediately saw through the opponent's intention and took the initiative to attack. His huge body flashed and disappeared into the dark sea. Boom! Boom! The sound of an explosion immediately came from the dark depths of the sea, making people feel as if their hearts had been hit by a heavy hammer, almost suffocating them. Everyone stared at the deep sea, trying to figure out what had happened. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion, and a ball of fire rose into the sky, but was quickly swallowed by the waves. Gue Qiansui swam back from the deep sea and said, "Shangxian, the enemy has been completely eliminated." Tang Zheng nodded with relief. The destruction of 2 submarines of the island nation would certainly make them feel distressed for a long time. "Let's move on," Tang Zheng ordered. Gue Qiansui took the lead and led the way. This time, they didn't encounter any more enemies. After a long time, they finally arrived at their destination, the island where Wu Junshan and the others lived. Everyone floated to the surface and walked on the beach. Seeing the island again, everyone had a complicated feeling. They had just walked through the gates of hell, so their mood was particularly complicated. The others didn't know Tang Zheng's plan, so they looked at him curiously. Tang Zheng smiled and didn't keep them in suspense. He said directly, everyone has lived on this island for so long, so we are familiar with it. Moreover, there are many houses on the island that can be used after some repairs, so it's more convenient. So I chose this island to be everyone's residence in the future. Isn't this place already exposed? The island nation won't let go of this place. Isn't this a living target? Someone questioned. Don't worry. Didn't I say that I will build a moving island? Everyone on the moving island won't be easily discovered by the enemy. Tang Zheng said. Moving island? Isn't this a fixed island? Everyone was skeptical. Tang Zheng didn't waste time and directly asked everyone to get on the island. Then he said, everyone, wait on the island for a while. There may be some movements later. Don't panic and be impatient. What movements will there be? We'll know in a while. Tang Zheng smiled mysteriously. Gue Qian Sui, let's go. Tang Zheng and Gue Qian Sui went into the sea together and soon sank to the bottom of the sea, leaving behind a group of people looking at each other and chattering. Wu Junshan looked at Lan Yu and said worriedly, can he do it? Lan Yu proudly raised his head and said unquestionably, of course he can. How can my son not do it? Marshall, don't you think so? Marshall had been staring at the sea. Hearing this, he turned his head and smiled. Master's wife is right. Lan Yu looked deeply at Marshall and praised, Marshall, you look very good when you smile. You are very feminine. In the future, smile more when you are beside Tang Zheng. He will definitely like it. Men like feminine women. Master's wife, Marshall's cheeks were slightly red. Although she had been with Lan Yu all the time, Lan Yu had never said such words to her. She couldn't help but feel shy. Silly girl, I'm doing this for your own good. He has so many women by his side. If you don't stand out, how can you compete with those women? Lan Yu said earnestly. Marshall's cheeks turned even redder. He wished he could find a hole to hide in. Cough. Hearing this, Wu Junshan suddenly coughed, reminding them that there were others. Lan Yu turned around and looked at the crowd. Go to the side. You have the nerve to eavesdrop on women's matters. Everyone smiled meaningfully and quickly retreated to the side. However, their gazes towards Marshall were very thought-provoking. In the past, Marshall had a high prestige in the Marshall organization. Sometimes, his prestige was even higher than some elders. Now that everyone was looking at him with such gazes, he was extremely shy. Lan Yu pulled Marshall's hand and said in a low voice, Marshall, I watched you grow up. I understand you too well. The environment of the Marshall organization has created you, turning you into a decisive person, just like a boy. The Marshall organization has let you down. Master's wife, Lan Yu interrupted her, shook his head and said, listen to me first. After all, you are a girl, so you should have the characteristics of a girl. How could I not know your feelings for Tang Zheng? Actually, I have high hopes for you too, and if you become my daughter-in-law, I will definitely be very happy. However, just like I said before, men will always like gentle women. This is the nature of men. If you restrain your previous personality and pretend to be gentle, you will definitely leave a deep impression on him and make him like you even more. Don't you want that too? At this point, Marshall no longer hesitated and asked nervously, really? Of course it's true. I've been there before, so I know better than you. Oh, I'll remember. Marshall blinked her big black eyes and silently memorized it. In addition, this time, when you accompany him back to Huaxia, you will definitely experience many difficulties and obstacles. You must always accompany him. This is a good opportunity to improve your relationship and capture a man's heart. Lan Yu personally instructed, and Marshall's mind also became active. The two of them whispered to each other non-stop. Boom! With a loud sound, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Everyone was shocked and exclaimed, what's going on? Is there an earthquake? Lan Yu and Marshall also stopped. Lan Yu remembered Tang Zheng's warning and quickly comforted them, don't worry, Tang Zheng said that nothing will happen. Everyone, don't panic. The island kept shaking as if there was a real earthquake. Everyone's face tightened and looked at each other, not knowing what happened. At this moment, Tang Zheng was staring at Gui Qiansui from the bottom of the sea. Gui Qiansui became a huge monster again. This time, it was bigger than before, like an island. It broke the stone connecting the island and the bottom of the sea. With a rumbling sound, the island immediately sank to the bottom of the sea. Gui Qiansui's figure flashed and swam to the bottom of the island. The island fell on its back, splashing countless waves, and the falling momentum of the island immediately stopped. So that's how it is. Although Tang Zheng already knew about Gui Qiansui's plan, seeing it with his own eyes, he still couldn't help but feel shocked. Gui Qiansui was really too powerful. He could actually carry an island like this. Tang Zheng couldn't estimate how heavy it was. Immortal, I'm done. Gui Qiansui fixed the island and said. Tang Zheng nodded and said, Gui Qiansui, it's been hard on you. Now, I'll leave all of them to you. Take care of them for me. Immortal, rest assured, with me here, I will do my best to protect their safety. It's just that I can't serve you in the future. No, your island is my last support. If I can't survive in the future, then I can only return to this island. Tang Zheng already had a plan. His strength was getting stronger and stronger, and the things he did were getting more and more out of hand. He couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be chased down by others. Chapter 711. Tang Zheng bid farewell to Gui Qiansui, returned to the shore, and explained everything to everyone. When everyone heard this, they were all shocked. A real island had actually become a moving island, becoming everyone's resting place. The island began to move, following the current towards Huaxia, moving at a speed that was not slow. One day, a fishing boat entered their line of sight, and the island stopped moving. Tang Zheng, Wu, and Xiao Bai boarded the fishing boat together, and a few days later, they boarded the land of Huaxia from the port. Once again stepping onto this hot land, Tang Zheng's heart was somewhat apprehensive, he did not know what was waiting for him. However, he would deal with whatever came his way. Whatever came his way, he would take it all on. Tang Zheng and Marshall were like a couple. On the same day, they bought a ticket back to the capital and entered the airport. Looking at the bustling crowd, Tang Zheng took a deep breath and said, "The motherland is still the best." The corner of Marshall's mouth slightly raised as she quietly looked at him. Her eyes were like water, extremely gentle. Tang Zheng turned his head to look at her, and said with a strange expression, "Ever since we left the island, I feel like you have changed into a different person." A trace of panic flashed across Marshall's eyes as she covered it up and said, "Nonsense, I didn't." Tang Zheng shrugged his shoulders and did not think too much about it. He took the boarding pass and said, "Let's go, we can board the plane." The two of them stood up and were about to walk towards the boarding gate when suddenly, there was an uproar in the departure hall. A group of people rushed over from afar, armed with live ammunition, their bodies emitting killing intent. Squeak squeak. Xiao Bai on his shoulder cried out vigilantly, its pair of small eyes rolling around as it bared its teeth. Its injuries had already healed, but the little guy seemed to have become a little irritable. Whenever there was a situation, it would be so angry that it wanted to spit fire. Tang Zheng rubbed its head and warned, "Xiao Bai, don't act recklessly." Xiao Bai was under his illusion, the others could not see Xiao Bai's existence at all. Marshall's pupils slightly constricted as she stared at the group of people rushing over and said in a low voice, "It seems like they are coming for us." Tang Zheng expressionlessly said, "Of course they are coming for us." He had already smelled a familiar aura from these people, super soldiers modified by the Dragon Group. The Dragon Group's genetic modification project was a great success, who knows how many super soldiers they had modified. Furthermore, the 4 heavenly kings were the best of the best. The burns on Marshall's body was caused by one of the 4 heavenly kings, the Fire King. "It's the Dragon Group." Marshall also saw the clues and said softly, Tang Zheng nodded his head without batting an eyelid. The dragon group spies are everywhere. If we use our real identities to buy tickets, then we will definitely be monitored by them. It seems that their formation is not small. I'm afraid that there will be a big one. Didn't you and the dragon groups? Why do they dare to be so bold? Marshall said suspiciously. Tang Zheng laughed coldly. The balance is only temporary. There must be other factors or other forces entering and breaking this balance. Then the dragon group's Xing Feng will naturally be unrestrained. Marshall frowned, agreeing with his point of view. Then what should we do? Let's wait and see. Let's see what kind of medicine the other party is selling. Tang Zheng was prepared to deal with all changes. Because, for the time being, he still could not figure out the dragon group's trump card. While they were talking, the dragon group had already surrounded the two of them. The other passengers were also forcefully isolated. Tang Zheng and Marshall were like dumplings filled with fillings, being chased and blocked in the middle. Tang Zheng remained unmoved. He looked around fearlessly and said, "Where's Xing Feng? If the main character doesn't come out, he will send you shrimp soldiers and crab generals." Back then, when Tang Zheng's cultivation was not as good as it was now, he was not afraid of the dragon group, let alone now that his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had already reached the 9th level of Anidia, and was only a step away from the Oris core stage. There was a commotion in the other party's crowd. 3 people walked out with a majestic gait. They glared at him and roared, "How dare you? Who do you think you are? How dare you call our boss by his name?" Tang Zheng glanced at the 3 of them and said, "The owner didn't come out, so he let the dogs out first. Furthermore, it's 3 dogs that can bark." "Oh, I remember that there were originally 4 dogs, but one of them had already turned into a dead dog, right?" He could tell that the 3 of them were completely different from the other super warriors. Especially the aura on their bodies, they were extremely cold, similar to the Fire King back then. Thus, he concluded that the 3 of them were definitely the other 3 of the 4 heavenly kings. As expected, when the 3 of them heard this, they were enraged. Some of them were about to attack, but they were stopped by one of the older ones. This person was the leader of the 4 heavenly kings, the Thunder King. These 3 heavenly kings were the Thunder King, Wind King, and Water King. Together with the Fire King, they formed the camp of the 4 heavenly kings. They were the cream of the crop after genetic modification, and each of them had a set of superb skills. So what if you have a sharp tongue? In any case, you won't be able to escape today even if you have wings. The Thunder King said with killing intent. Tang Zheng was unmoved. He swept a disdainful glance at the other party and said, "With just you guys? Tang Zheng, you think you're number 1 under the heavens just because other people think you're number 1? Let me tell you, this time we came prepared. If you dare to resist, then you will be going against this country." The Thunder King said solemnly. "Going against the country?" Tang Zheng's expression turned cold. "Can your dragon group represent the country?" The Thunder King said confidently, "Perhaps not in the past, but today, at this very moment, the dragon group represents the country. If you resist, then you will be going against the country. I am not joking with you. Actually, I would be more happy if you resist, because then you will definitely die today. I am very happy to see this kind of scene." Tang Zheng stared unblinkingly into the Thunder King's eyes, confirming that he was not lying. His heart thumped. Something must have happened during this period of time that caused the dragon group's status to rise greatly. Otherwise, the other party would not be so unrestrained. But could it be that he was just going to follow them? The dragon group was not a benevolent group. As long as he fell into their hands, it would be like a lamb entering the tiger's den. Even if he did not die, he would lose a layer of skin. Seeing Tang Zheng's expression change, the Thunder King said with killing intent, "There is no time for you to consider. Since you are not going to surrender, then we will take action directly. Resist as much as you want. The more you resist, the more people you kill, and the happier I will be." As if trying to goad him, These words caused Tang Zheng's eyelids to twitch. Flames of fury shot up within him. In the blink of an eye, the Thunder King waved his hand, and the other super soldiers charged forward. In an instant, the airport was in chaos, and screams rang out everywhere. This kind of scene was rare, and there were still many people who stopped to watch. Tang Zheng had originally wanted to call Su Yingtian to clarify things, but the other party's movements were too fast. Before he could take out his phone, the attack had already reached him. Tang Zheng frowned deeply, weighing the pros and cons. In the end, he decided not to take a loss for the time being. Otherwise, if he fell into the other party's hands, he would be at their mercy. "Do it!" he called out in a low voice. Just as he was about to counterattack with his martial arts, he heard a thunderous voice ring out. "Stop, all of you stop. I want to see who dares to make a move today. Then I will definitely make him regret being born into this world." This voice was crude and filled with an explosive aura. However, it was as if it had a magical power, causing everyone to subconsciously stop what they were doing. The three heavenly kings frowned at the same time. Today, the three of them had made a move together, and that meant that they had a plan in mind. If Tang Zheng resisted, the three of them would work together to capture him, or even kill him directly. This was Xing Feng's plan. It was a pity that an unforeseen event had suddenly occurred. If they wanted to carry out this plan, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens. Moreover, there was a possibility that they would achieve the opposite of what they wanted. Even the three heavenly kings could not bear this responsibility. Another group of people charged in, and like a spear, they charged at the people from the dragon group, causing them to sway unsteadily and fall into disarray. A tall figure came before Tang Zheng, frowning as he looked him up and down. Then, he thumped heavily on his chest, and said, "You brat, you really make people worry." Tang Zheng smiled slightly, and said, "Chief Su, you came just in time. I had no choice but to come in time. Do you think I don't know your temper? If I had come just a little later, you would have directly torn down this airport. That would have been a huge mess." As he said that, Su Yingtian glanced at the people from the dragon group, and said, "Wouldn't that be fulfilling their wishes? I won't just stand by and watch this kind of thing happen." The Thunder King's expression changed slightly, and he walked out, furiously saying, "Chief Su, Tang Zheng is someone that our boss specifically wants. Are you trying to stop us and go against the dragon group with such a big lineup?" Su Yingtian glanced at the other party in disdain, and said, "Who do you think you are to dare speak to me like that?" The Thunder King's face alternated between red and white as he roared furiously, "Su Yingtian, don't go too far." Su Yingtian ignored the Thunder King, and said, "Go back and tell your boss that if he wants to touch Tang Zheng, he will have to go through me first. Hold it right there." Seeing that the other party was about to leave, the Thunder King quickly blocked his path. The others also moved, and the Dragon Group and the National Security Bureau were in a standoff. The flames of war seemed to be on the verge of erupting. Su Yingtian's expression did not change as he stared coldly at the Thunder King, and said, "You want to stop me? Don't blame me for being merciless. Su Yingtian, you should know that Tang Zheng is someone that the higher-ups specifically want. If you dare to take him away, that would be disobeying orders," the Thunder King said in exasperation. Su Yingtian pursed his lips, and said, "The higher-ups? You want to use this to suppress me? Let me tell you, when I use this move, you won't even know where you are. Before you want to stop me, you'd better call your boss and ask for instructions. Otherwise, you'll suffer a loss and have no one to reason with." Su Yingtian's aura was strong, and his entire body was exuding a tyrannical aura. The Thunder King did not dare to underestimate him at all. Seeing him make such a solemn vow, the Thunder King felt a little guilty, and he took out his phone to make a call. "Yes, I got it." After speaking for a while, the Thunder King's expression turned ugly. As he spoke, he raised his head to look at Tang Zheng and Su Yingtian, seemingly unwilling to accept this. Chapter 712. The Thunder Emperor glared at Tang Zheng and gnashed his teeth. We're not finished. After that, he turned around and left with his subordinates. Suing Tian looked at the other party's departing figure with ridicule. When the other party was far away, his face sank. The dragon group is becoming more and more unrestrained. They even dared to touch a consultant from the National Security Bureau. Tang Zheng relaxed and asked, "It seems that there have been many changes in the country recently." Suing Tian bitterly smiled and shook his head. "It's a long story. Let's leave this place first." The group left the departure hall in a grandiose manner and took several cars to a military cargo plane in the airport. The military plane roared as it flew into the blue sky. Only then did the group feel slightly relieved. Suing Tian looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze and asked with a solemn expression, "Now you can tell me what you did in the island nation." "I'm all ears." Tang Zheng gently caressed Xiao Bai. He had already removed the illusion on Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai was lying on his lap and didn't care about the curious gazes of others. Tang Zheng organized his words and spoke. This time, he didn't hide the news of Wu Junqian's group. After all, the Li Palace already knew about this matter. It wasn't easy to hide it from the government. As expected, Suing Tian wasn't surprised when he heard the news of Wu Junqian's group. Clearly, he already knew about this matter. Furthermore, a trace of gratification flashed across his face. However, when he heard that the Li Palace had colluded with the island nation and betrayed Wu Junqian's group, Suing Tian's face sank. Almost everyone in Huaxia, including those in the government, didn't have a good impression of the island nation. This was because of history. The Li Palace had actually colluded with the island nation to harm Wu Junqian's group. This was truly infuriating. After all, Wu Junqian's group was a part of Huaxia. This was equivalent to colluding with the enemy and harming their own people. However, there were too many factors involved. Suing Tian didn't immediately express his opinion. In the end, when he heard the inside story of the Yamada no Orochi and the war decades ago, Suing Tian couldn't sit still any longer. He slapped the armrest of the chair, shattering it into pieces. Tang Zheng had already expected that he would have this kind of reaction. Any Chinese person with a bit of courage would have the same reaction after hearing the truth. Damn Japanese, so they actually concocted such a big scheme and even killed so many Chinese compatriots. Suing Tian angrily roared. Tang Zheng calmly said, "Now that you know the truth, how do you evaluate my actions in the island nation?" Suing Tian was startled. He understood the meaning of Tang Zheng's words. His expression was somewhat complicated as he sighed. "As an official, I obviously don't want you to do such an extreme thing. But as a Huaxia person, I can't help but clap my hands in joy. What you've done is too damn satisfying." Suing Tian heavily slapped Tang Zheng's shoulder and continued, "Although I'm an official, I'm first and foremost a Huaxia person. Those people in the Imperial Advisor's residence and the Imperial Palace all deserve to die. They should die without a burial site." Tang Zheng looked at him with gratification and said, "I didn't misjudge you." Suing Tian revealed a bitter smile and sighed, "The new generation excels the old. The secret of decades has been discovered by you. Humph, let's see how the island nation can be arrogant now." "Oh." Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. "The island nation must have already found out my identity, so they're pressuring the country, right?" Suing Tian nodded his head. "The island nation's attitude is firm, so they're under a lot of pressure." "What do they want?" "Of course they want us to hand you over. Otherwise, why would the Dragon Group send so many people to capture you?" "But the Dragon Group isn't the only one in the country. There are still many righteous and unyielding people." Tang Zheng recalled the scene from before and curiously asked, "Why did the Dragon Group suddenly compromise?" "Because I invited a big shot to reject the Dragon Group's previous proposal." Suing Tian pretended to be mysterious as he said. "Big shot? Who?" Tang Zheng curiously asked. Suing Tian laughed and purposely kept him in suspense. "This is a secret for now. You'll naturally know when you see him." Tang Zheng was filled with suspicion as he looked out the window and asked, I forgot to ask you, where are we going? Of course it's the capital. Didn't you buy a ticket to go to the capital? Alright, then I'd like to see who this big shot you're talking about is. Tang Zheng did not ask further. The plane whistled through the clouds. In just a few hours, the plane landed at a military airport on the outskirts of the capital. An off-road vehicle carrying Tang Zheng, Wu, and Su Yingtian sped towards the center of the city. Looking at the familiar scenery and streets outside the window, the weather was already hot. The streets were filled with people wearing cool clothes, and the beauties began to reveal their slender snow-white thighs, attracting the men's gazes. The off-road vehicle drove straight into the center of the capital. Tang Zheng's pupils constricted as he stared at the building in front of him. This building was not tall, but rather, it was a little short in the capital that was filled with tall buildings. However, as a person from Huaxia, no one dared to look down on this place. This place was much more powerful than those skyscrapers, because this represented the center of Huaxia's power. Any Huaxia person who came here couldn't help but feel a little apprehensive, or even reverent. Even Tang Zheng was no exception. After all, he was a secular person who had received more than 10 years of traditional education. Even though his strength had greatly increased in the past year and he had experienced many major events, some of the genes hidden in his bones could not be changed in a short period of time. On the other hand, Wu was unperturbed. He glanced outside and then closed his eyes to rest. Even his mood did not fluctuate in the slightest. Power, in her eyes, was really ephemeral. She had been taught to despise secular power since she was young. This was a world of difference from Tang Zheng. As if sensing his mood, Su Yingtian said, "Don't be nervous, there are also people living here. Moreover, in terms of individual strength, you are stronger than any of them." Tang Zheng revealed a wry smile, took a deep breath, suppressed the fear in his heart, and said, "It's my first time here, so it's difficult to avoid the customs." Su Yingtian chuckled in satisfaction at Tang Zheng's bluntness, and said, "The first time I came here, I was even more nervous than you. My hands were trembling, and my legs were almost unable to take a step. In the end, when I went back, I found that my vest was full of sweat, and my clothes were as if they had been fished out of the water. Is it that exaggerated?" Tang Zheng sneered. Although he was in awe of the power here, it was not to that extent. "It's not exaggerated at all. I'm still considered good. There are people who are so weak that they can't even walk. Your condition is already very good." Su Yingtian praised. After hearing his words, Tang Zheng's remaining trace of nervousness gradually disappeared. He loosened his shoulders, and instead felt a kind of unprecedented ease. Seeing his change, Su Yingtian's eyes flashed with a strange light. He secretly praised him. A dragon among men, as expected, extraordinary. This change was far from what an ordinary person could compare to. The off-road vehicle passed through a strict inspection and passed through a series of armed guards before finally entering the central area of this power center. Most of the buildings here were courtyards or 2- or 3-story buildings. These buildings were hidden in the greenery. Although there was already a trace of summer in the sky, when one was in this space, one's whole body was emitting a cool feeling. A cool breeze brushed past one's face, and it was incomparably comfortable. The few of them got out of the car, and Su Yingtian led the 2 people and 1 beast into one of the courtyards with ease. Tang Zheng could not help but size up. The Ye family's residence in the capital was also a courtyard, and it occupied a larger area than this courtyard. However, Tang Zheng felt that this courtyard was far more formidable than the Ye families, especially the few powerful auras in the dark, which made Tang Zheng's heart involuntarily tremble a few times. What a tight security force! Tang Zheng secretly praised. The security here was even tighter than the imperial palace of the island nation. Although there were many masters in the imperial palace, there were very few true masters. However, judging from the auras that Tang Zheng felt just now, there were definitely no less than 3 masters. The corner of Tang Zheng's mouth raised. They had really mobilized a lot of people. Were they afraid that they would not be able to control him and prevent him from harming people? But on second thought, he was relieved. If any one of the people living here had an accident, it would be a major event no less than an earthquake for the country of Huaxia. It would affect the development and strategy of the entire country and affect thousands of families. Indeed, they couldn't be careless. Of course, from the difference in the strength of the guards, it could be seen that Huaxia's foundation was far from what the island nation could compare to. What was extremely laughable was that the island nation still did not give up and tried to start a war with Huaxia again. Wu, you and Xiaobai need to stay in this room for the time being. The few of them entered a small room, and Su Yingtian said solemnly. At this moment, his brows were filled with the seriousness of official business. When Wu heard this, he immediately frowned and looked towards Tang Zheng. I want to bring Tang Zheng to see an important figure. He's the only one, I don't have the authority to bring anyone else in. Su Yingtian said honestly. Wu still did not say anything, but his brows were knitted tighter and tighter. The atmosphere was somewhat tense. Tang Zheng roughly guessed Su Yingtian's thoughts, and said, Wu, you and Xiaobai stay here, I'll be back soon. When Wu heard this, his brows immediately relaxed, and his eyes became gentle, like a pool of autumn water, causing Su Yingtian to be speechless. When did Wu become so docile and obedient? He looked deeply at Tang Zheng. How many more surprises would this brat give him? Tang Zheng and Su Yingtian walked out together, passed through a courtyard, and arrived at a study room. They knocked on the door and entered, and a room full of books greeted their eyes. Although it was Tang Zheng's first time here, he could clearly feel that the books on the bookshelves were definitely not used as decorations to show off, but were frequently flipped through. It could be seen how astonishing the reading volume of the owner of this place was. Chapter 713. This back view often appeared on television news and in various news reports. Most of the citizens had a deep impression of it. Tang Zheng was no exception. Although the other party had yet to turn around, Tang Zheng had already guessed his identity. He couldn't help but be stunned. Why was he here to see him? Who was this person? It was the person who had a meeting with Su Yingtian, Xing Feng, and the others some time ago. He was one of the people at the top of the power pyramid in Huaxia, the bureau chief of the central government, an absolute big shot. Compared to him, all the officials rumored to be in charge of the borders were insignificant. Hearing the footsteps, the bureau chief turned around. His bright and imposing gaze swept past Tang Zheng. He nodded without batting an eyelid and said, "Heroes come from the young. It's true that heroes come from the young. You've done such a big thing at such a young age." Although his words were good, there was a hint of reproach in them. Su Yingtian was an old hand in the bureaucracy. How could he not tell? His heart couldn't help but skip a beat as he thought to himself, this is bad. Tang Zheng didn't think about the deeper meaning of the other party's words. His expression didn't change. Although the other party's identity was out of Tang Zheng's expectations, the respect he had when he first came in had unknowingly disappeared. He said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Thank you for the compliment. This is what I should do." Clearly, he didn't think that what he had done in the island nation was wrong. He took the other party's words as genuine praise. Hearing that, the bureau chief's thick brows immediately furrowed. His gaze turned sharp as he stared straight at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was also someone who had been through a lot. The bureau chief's halo was useful to ordinary people, but not to Tang Zheng. Therefore, Tang Zheng calmly looked straight into the bureau chief's eyes. Their gazes met, and the study was terrifyingly silent. The air seemed to have frozen. Su Yingtian's breathing was almost out of control. He rolled his eyes and lamented to himself, "Why did I forget to give Tang Zheng a heads up just now? This is too rash and will only backfire." But at this moment, he had no way of reminding Tang Zheng. The corner of Su Yingtian's mouth twitched a few times. He tasted bitterness in his mouth, but there was nothing he could do. What should I do? You actually feel that it's quite glorious." The bureau chief didn't seem to approve of Tang Zheng's attitude. Tang Zheng said calmly, of course, killing the enemy is part of our duty. Moreover, the other party has committed many crimes in Huaxia. This is just the interest collected from them. That's an old story. Is that so? You think you can forget the past just because you're an adult? History is meant to be remembered, not forgotten. Tang Zheng wasn't afraid in the slightest and said firmly. Su Yingtian's jaw almost dropped to the ground. He really wanted to rush up and cover Wang Zheng's mouth, praying that he would stop talking nonsense. History is meant to be remembered, not forgotten. The bureau chief's expression changed slightly as he repeated this sentence. He looked at Tang Zheng with a hint of approval in his eyes. Today's society was too impetuous. Everyone was looking forward and risking their lives for money and status. There were very few people who had this kind of awareness of the big picture, or this kind of spirit. Without a doubt, Tang Zheng's words touched the bureau chief. But the bureau chief didn't give up. He still said in a deep voice, but everything has to be done in a certain way. If you mess around like this, you will only end up in a passive position and disrupt the established steps. Tang Zheng didn't give in at all. He said stubbornly, but sometimes the arrow has to be shot. Island Nation has two malignant tumors, Yamata no Orochi and the Imperial Tutor's residence. If we don't get rid of them, there will be endless troubles in the future. Imperial Tutor's residence, Yamata no Orochi? The bureau chief frowned. He was no stranger to the Imperial Tutor's residence. After all, the National Security Bureau had a lot of information on the Imperial Tutor's residence. But it was the first time he heard of Yamata no Orochi. Tang Zheng didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Su Yingtian. Su Yingtian understood tacitly. He knew that Tang Zheng wanted him to introduce the situation and give him the opportunity to show his face. He couldn't help but feel grateful. He quickly organized his words and introduced the situation of Yamata no Orochi. As expected, the bureau chief and Su Yingtian had the same reaction. Especially when it came to the conspiracy of the war decades ago, his eyes were obviously burning with anger. Seeing that ball of anger, Tang Zheng was secretly relieved. If the country's leader could still maintain this sense of pride and honor for history, then this country had a lot of hope. There's such a thing. It was the bureau chief's first time hearing about this inside story. He stared at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng nodded seriously. I can guarantee the authenticity of this information. The bureau chief nodded seriously and looked at Su Yingtian. Su Yingtian had an idea and said, then we can use this to change the situation this time. Obviously, he wanted to use this to make a fuss. After all, the island nation was already putting pressure on Huaxia to make Huaxia hand over Tang Zheng. The bureau chief also saw through Su Yingtian's thoughts. He didn't comment. Tang Zheng did not care about what the two of them were thinking and said to himself, I haven't finished speaking yet. This is only a part of the news. There is another piece of news that is even more important. I think you guys are more interested in hearing it. What? My guess is that the eight-headed serpent has already been subdued by the 100 Transformations Star Lord. These two fellows are together, colluding with each other. The consequences will be extremely terrifying, and it is definitely not something you want to see. Tang Zheng said in a heavy tone. Actually, he didn't want to see this result either. Although this news hadn't been confirmed, he completely believed it. 100 Faces Star Lord. The bureau chief's eyelids twitched, and his expression changed slightly. His big reaction was enough to show the magic power of the name 100 Faces Star Lord. Back then, what happened in the 100,000 Mountains was not a secret. The government had already inquired about most of it through various channels. Later on, they even sent elite troops to barge into the 100,000 Mountains, but without exception, they were all annihilated. Among them, the scattered news that was sent back was that 100 Faces Star Lord was very terrifying. The 100,000 Mountains had become the territory of monsters, and those who barged in would definitely die. After countless failures and sacrifices, the government finally gave up on the idea of sending people into the 100,000 Mountains. But the name Hundred Faces Star-Lord was like a nightmare. It spread among the upper echelons of power, and the few big bosses heard it like thunder. Suing Tian also looked at Tang Zheng in shock. After hearing this news, his heart couldn't help but beat faster. 100 Faces Star-Lord had already made them helpless. If Yamata no Orochi was added, it would definitely be a huge disaster. Then wouldn't they immediately attack us? Suing Tian asked in a hoarse voice. Tang Zheng had also been thinking about this problem. After a few days of thinking, he rejected this idea. He shook his head and said, "No." "Ah, why?" The other two looked at Tang Zheng curiously, as they were curious about this answer that was out of their expectations. "Because they have a bigger plan. My intuition is that they won't act rashly before this plan succeeds." This was the conclusion that Tang Zheng came to from Hundred Faces Star-Lord's reaction of biding his time for such a long time. He believed in his own results. A bigger plan? What's that? Tang Zheng didn't intend to reveal this news at first. But after seeing the bureau chief, he changed his mind. Perhaps letting the government know this news would be more effective in stopping Hundred Faces Star-Lord's plan. Use the Mountain River blood sacrifice array formed by tens of thousands of people to bring the Devil Clan back to this world, Tang Zheng said in a deep voice. Swoosh swoosh. As soon as this was said, the two of them changed their expressions. They were no stranger to the term Devil Clan. They knew what the Devil Clan represented, they represented slaughter and blood. If the Devil Clan descended, then this world would really be finished. The bureau chief couldn't help but grab Tang Zheng's hand and ask, "Will the Devil Clan really descend to this world?" Tang Zheng said honestly, "It's possible, as long as Hundred Faces Star-Lord's plan succeeds." That Mountain River blood sacrifice array? Yes, this formation is extremely bloody and vicious. It requires the lives and blood of tens of thousands of people as a catalyst to activate the formation and bring the Demon Clan back from the skies beyond. Tang Zheng's voice couldn't help but become heavy. He couldn't imagine what would happen to this world after the Devil Clan descended. How do we stop him? The bureau chief asked directly. Use all the information we have to search for the missing people in various places and stop Hundred Faces Star-Lord from finding so many victims. Suing Tian asked worriedly, "Will it work?" Tang Zheng wasn't very confident. He said helplessly, "Do your best and leave the rest to fate." No. How can this world be destroyed by Hundred Faces Star-Lord? We can't be so lucky. What do you mean do your best and leave the rest to fate? That's too negative. We have to deal with it actively. Suing Tian, I give you full authority to mobilize any resources to investigate the entire country. We can't neglect any missing people. We have to investigate to the end. The bureau chief gave a strict order. Yes. Suing Tian straightened his body and said passionately. He couldn't hide the excitement between his brows. During the last meeting, he was almost in despair. Tang Zheng's actions caused the country to be in a passive position. Furthermore, with Xing Feng fanning the flames, his situation became even worse. Many people even directly sentenced his career and life to death. But he didn't give up. He finally convinced the bureau chief to meet Tang Zheng. He even brought Tang Zheng over personally. Fortunately, he arrived in time and stopped the conflict between Tang Zheng and the Dragon Group. Otherwise, when the bureau chief heard about the conflict between Tang Zheng and the Dragon Group, he would have given up on meeting Tang Zheng. There wouldn't have been so many things that followed. Suing Tian heaved a sigh of relief. But he didn't show it. His face was still serious. Tang Zheng didn't know that his unintentional actions had a positive impact on the country. And it was a positive impact that affected thousands of families. Originally, the problem of human trafficking in the country was not stopped. But because the country increased its efforts to investigate missing people, many missing people were found in time and reunited with their families. There were many women and children among them. Chapter 714. The bureau chief looked at Tang Zheng sternly and asked, as a cultivator, you have a special identity. Do you have any suggestions? Tang Zheng's heart moved, and he asked the question that had been buried in his heart for a long time. How does the country view cultivators? Hiss. Suing Tian sucked in a breath of cold air. This question was too direct. The bureau chief was calm and said, cultivators and martial artists are the same. They are also part of society. A few hundred years ago, cultivators were expelled. That was because people were limited by their knowledge and experience. Now that technology is advanced, many things are different. Cultivators can also exist in this world like martial artists. Tang Zheng was happy. It seemed that the government's attitude towards cultivators was much more open-minded. They didn't just suppress them. However, cultivators are too special. Or rather, they are too powerful. If too many of them exist in this world, there will be many problems. The bureau chief added. Tang Zheng's head thumped. It was as if a bucket of cold water was poured on his head. His excitement was extinguished. He smiled bitterly. He was too naive. He really thought that the government would accept all cultivators. At least with the current situation, it was impossible. Greater than or equal to cultivators were too powerful. Especially Tang Zheng's action this time, the government had directly witnessed the power of cultivators. Cultivators were like nuclear bombs. They were very powerful. If they were within a controlled range, they would be beneficial to the country. If they were completely out of control, they would definitely be a very unstable factor. That was to say, if a small number of cultivators existed, the country wouldn't interfere too much. If they allowed a large number of cultivators to return, the government wouldn't sit by and do nothing. Of course, there was another layer of meaning in the bureau chief's words. Tang Zheng also figured it out. The bureau chief emphasized on technology. That was to say, it wasn't a few hundred years ago. The government had no way to deal with cultivators. The power of technology couldn't be underestimated. Not to mention nuclear bombs, the mecha developed by the Dragon Group couldn't be underestimated. There were also super soldiers. No one could be sure that super soldiers wouldn't be weaker than cultivators in the future. Also, super soldiers could be mass-produced. That would be a very terrifying force. The bureau chief's words were a combination of kindness and authority, which gave Tang Zheng a lot of insights. However, he was not as enthusiastic as Tian Chanzi about the return of the large group of cultivators. He had already determined that if the large group of cultivators returned, it would not be of much benefit to the ordinary people. What he considered was not the stability of the regime, but the benefits to the general public. Both sides had different starting points, but they could be considered to have reached the same conclusion. Thus, Tang Zheng solemnly nodded and said, cultivators will not harm the country, but I hope that the country will not judge people with colored glasses, or sooner or later there will be problems. As soon as he said this, Suing Tian's back was drenched in sweat. These words were too bold. It was equivalent to threatening the other party, telling the government not to go too far. Otherwise, the cultivators would also resist. No one had ever dared to say such things in front of the chief. Suing Tian was secretly anxious for Tang Zheng. Newborn calves were not afraid of tigers. The bureau chief looked at Tang Zheng with burning eyes. Their eyes met, and after a long time, the bureau chief took the initiative to reach out his hand and simply said, "Okay." The two hands tightly held together, and it could be considered that they had reached a preliminary consensus. Suing Tian brought Tang Zheng out of the study and said in a low voice, "You are so bold. You scared me to death just now. I almost had a heart attack." Tang Zheng smiled indifferently. "Is it so exaggerated?" "Of course. You don't know, but if there is really a disagreement, there are countless experts in the dark who are not to be trifled with." Suing Tian said with a bitter smile. "I am not to be trifled with either." Tang Zheng said quietly. If the other party really wanted to kill him, he would not sit still and wait for death. In the end, it was still unknown who would emerge victorious. If Su Yingtian knew his true thoughts, he would probably be so scared that he would hide far away. Seeing Tang Zheng's disapproving expression, Su Yingtian only hoped to bring them away from this place as soon as possible. Suddenly, a person walked in front of them. The two of them were startled, and their expressions became somewhat unsightly. Enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. They actually met Xing Feng here. Xing Feng strode towards the two of them and stopped in front of them. He coldly looked at Tang Zheng and said, "This time, consider yourself lucky. You managed to get away with it." Tang Zheng looked at the other party in ridicule and said, "Xing Feng, to be honest, when I first saw you, I really did not expect that you would have today. Otherwise, when we were in Dianan, you would have died long ago." Xing Feng's pupils shrank and said, "I still have to thank you. If not for you, I would not have today's achievements." This was the truth. Back then, Xing Feng was just a general in the army in Dianan. He still had to look up to Long Xianyuan. But now, he was the leader of the dragon group, and the power of the Long family was no longer a threat to him. "Then we will meet again. Let's see who will have the last laugh." Tang Zheng did not waste time with the other party and directly said it out loud. "Then let's wait and see." Xing Feng coldly snorted, walked past the two of them, and strode away. Turning his head to look at his back, Tang Zheng frowned and said, "The chief summoned him?" Su Yingtian sighed and said, "The situation of the Dragon Group and the National Security Bureau as equals has already formed. Especially this time, the Dragon Group was one step ahead of the National Security Bureau in reporting the island nation's information, causing the National Security Bureau to be very passive. The Dragon Group is in the limelight. I've implicated you." Tang Zheng patted Su Yingtian's shoulder. "What's there to be polite about? My point of view is the same as yours. The Dragon Group won't be able to jump around for long, especially since Xing Feng is too high profile. Furthermore, he has the final say in the Dragon Group." The two of them returned to the hut, picked up Wu and Xiao Bai, and left this heavily guarded place together. When they were about to part ways, Su Yingtian pulled Tang Zheng and asked in a low voice, "I still have a question in my heart. Where did you place Wu Junshan and the others?" Wu Junshan and the others were a force that could not be underestimated, but it was as if they had disappeared from the face of the earth. Tang Zheng smiled mysteriously and did not answer. He held Wu's hand and quickly disappeared in front of Su Yingtian's eyes. Su Yingtian shook his head. There was nothing he could do. In the same study room, the head sat on a chair behind the desk. Xing Feng carefully sat on the sofa and looked at the head in awe. The Li Palace has already sent back news. The Li Palace master has already explained the matter of the island nation. This is only a personal grudge between the Li Palace and Wu Junshan and the others. It does not involve the country, so they used the power of the island nation. Before this, they did not know about the matter of the Yamada no Orochi. It turned out that before Tang Zheng could say the truth, the Li Palace had already contacted the Dragon Group and explained the matter of the island nation. They wanted to remove the Li Palace from this matter and reduce the country's hostility towards the Li Palace. Hearing this, the head's face turned cold. Personal grudge, humph. Xing Feng's heart thumped. The head was really angry. The actions of the Li Palace were contrary to the country's wishes. It was truly infuriating. "Head, I believe that the Li Palace master is not someone who does not know how to adapt to the situation. He would not do such a disgraceful thing as colluding with the enemy." Although he knew that the other party was angry, Xing Feng still had to bite the bullet and explain for the Li Palace. The head coldly looked at Xing Feng. Xing Feng hurriedly lowered his head and said, "The Dragon Group has conducted a detailed investigation of the Li Palace. What they said should be true. Furthermore, the Dragon Group has already begun to infiltrate the Li Palace." Chapter 7:15. Tang Zheng and Wu strode in. Since they didn't go wrong, they couldn't just enter and not enter. Wu looked around curiously. She had to admit that Princess Anne's taste was indeed extraordinary. Even someone like her, who didn't know anything about decorations, could see the extraordinary charm. Tang Zheng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "If I were to come back in a while, I'm afraid this place would have become a real palace." Wu said with a gloomy face, "This kind of woman is really powerful." "What's so great about that?" "This is the education she received since she was young, just like how you know martial arts." Tang Zheng said disapprovingly. "Really?" "Of course." Dong dong dong. While they were talking, the crisp sound of high heels hitting the ground rang out, followed by a beautiful voice, "Ah, Tang Zheng, you're back." As soon as she finished speaking, a figure flew over like a gust of wind. If not for Tang Zheng moving to the side, she would have directly pounced on Tang Zheng. If this person wasn't Princess Anne, who else could it be? Princess Anne was still perfect and flawless, causing people's hearts to palpitate. She stared at Tang Zheng with a pair of big black eyes, looking at him in pleasant surprise. During this period of time, not only did her life as a commoner not consume her noble temperament, it made her seem even more outstanding, like the most noble and holy white swan in the world. "You're finally back. I thought you would never come back after leaving without saying goodbye." Princess Anne said happily. Tang Zheng pointed to the house with a straight face and asked, "What did you do to me? Is it beautiful?" Princess Annie showed off excitedly, just like a child showing off the fruits of her labor to an adult. "These are all carefully designed by me. Every piece of decoration was personally selected by me. They were flown in from Sweden. I guarantee that they are absolutely authentic." Tang Zheng rolled his eyes and said, "Is there a need for that?" "Of course it is necessary. Home is the most important place for us to live in. If we aren't satisfied with it, then we won't have the energy to work and study all day, so this is necessary." Princess Anne nodded and said solemnly. Tang Zheng was speechless. According to his understanding, a home was a place to put one's soul. A simple house was enough. There was no need to be so luxurious. There was indeed a world of difference between a princess and a commoner. "You came back at the right time. I've been in Huaxia for so long, but I've never had the chance to take a good look around the capital. Every day, I have to juggle between school and home. I'm getting tired of it," Princess Anne grumbled. "No time." Tang Zheng refused without hesitation. Princess Anne was not angry. She rolled her eyes and slyly said, "If you promise me, then I will tell you something very important." "What is it?" "Promise me and I'll tell you. If you don't want to say it, then forget it." Tang Zheng was not going to fall for it. Okay, I'll tell you." Princess Anne compromised. "Yi Dingdang is sick." "What?" Tang Zheng was shocked. "I knew you would be interested." Princess Anne proudly said, "Ever since you silently disappeared, she has been sick." Tang Zheng did not say anything and rushed out the door. "Stop! Where are you going?" Princess Anne shouted. "I'm going to look for Dingdang." To tell the truth, when he heard that Yi Dingdang was seriously ill, Tang Zheng's heart felt as if it had been hollowed out. Worry surged in, accompanied by a strong sense of self-blame. "Come back, you don't have to go. She has already recovered." Princess Anne quickly said. "Recovered? Of course, you disappeared for so long. If she was sick for so long, then wouldn't it be very serious? Then what kind of illness does she have?" Princess Anne shook her head. "I don't know, but I heard from their roommates that it should be related to you." "Related to me?" Tang Zheng felt a pain in his heart as he remembered the last time they parted. Yi Dingdang's determination to leave the table in the middle of the night, as well as the intense pain in her eyes, even a blind person could see it clearly. It would be strange if she wasn't angry and sad that he had disappeared for no reason. Therefore, her illness was most likely caused by him. Thinking to this point, Tang Zheng could not stand still any longer and said to Marshall, "Go to my room to rest, I'll leave for a while." Although Marshall knew what Tang Zheng was going to do, she did not stop him. She had thousands of voices in her heart that wanted to stop Tang Zheng, but in the end, she did not say anything. Hey, don't go. I've already told you. You have to accompany me to the capital. Princess Anne did not have any worries and straightforwardly called out. Tang Zheng did not even turn his head as he turned a deaf ear and disappeared through the door, leaving behind the two women looking at each other in dismay. Princess Anne fiercely stomped her feet and said, "If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have told him this news. I ran away so quickly like a rabbit." With that, he turned his gaze and fixed it on Marshall. The corner of his mouth slightly raised as he asked with interest, "You are Marshall, right?" Marshall proudly raised his head and did not answer. He directly walked towards Tang Zheng's room. "Wow, you have a personality." Princess Anne's eyes lit up. She had never been a person who followed the rules and regulations. She was a typical rebel amongst the princesses of the royal family. Seeing martial arts being so cold, she did not feel offended. Instead, she was interested. "It's almost time for dinner. It must be over. I'll treat you to a meal." Princess Anne took the initiative to express her goodwill. If it was anyone else, they would definitely be overjoyed. They would feel that it was their greatest honor. But Marshall did not take this lying down. He turned around and left. With a bang, he closed the door, leaving Princess Anne to stare. She smacked her lips. She did not feel offended. Instead, she praised from the bottom of her heart, "Such a girl with a personality is really too interesting. It seems that we will be living under the same roof in the future. That's great." "Oh, no, doesn't this mean that Tang Zheng is going to live with Marshall?" Her face instantly darkened, and the light in her eyes also disappeared in an instant. Tang Zheng anxiously rushed to school but was told that Yi Dingdang had gone home. Thus, under the complaints of Yi Dingdang's 3 roommates, he hurriedly rushed towards the Ye family. The Ye family's courtyard house was serene and quiet. However, it was completely different from the courtyard house that Tang Zheng previously went to. He did not rush into the Ye family's entrance because he was stopped at the entrance. He was already considered a frequent guest of the Ye family. How could the guards at the entrance not recognize him? However, he was still stopped. Tang Zheng suspiciously raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's going on with you guys?" "Sorry, the Ye family does not welcome you." The guard stiffly said. "Does not welcome me? Did you recognize the wrong person?" Tang Zheng asked in confusion. "Of course we recognize you. We would still recognize you even if you turned into ashes." The guard unhappily said, "Aren't you Tang Zheng? The one we are stopping is you. The Ye family does not welcome you." This. Tang Zheng was speechless. Just what happened? How could there be such a big change in the blink of an eye? No, he had to see Yi Dingdang. Otherwise, he would not be able to sleep and eat in peace. "If you want to stop me, then don't blame me for being impolite." Tang Zheng was ready to force his way in. With a push of his hands, the guard was no match for him. With a bang, he slammed into the door and could no longer block his way. Tang Zheng rushed into the Ye family. In an instant, many people gathered from all directions and shouted angrily, "Stop! Do you think the Ye family is a place where you can come and go as you please? Stop right there!" The crowd attacked and Tang Zheng immediately fell into a sea of people. Seeing that he could not move forward, Tang Zheng was burning with anxiety and anger. "Since that's the case, then don't blame me for being impolite." Bang bang bang, his figure flashed and palm shadows flew. The people in front of him were sent flying one by one. After a while, there was no one who could stand up. Tang Zheng was about to move forward when suddenly, an angry roar exploded, "Stop!" Yi Tianlei walked out with an ashen face and scolded, "Tang Zheng, this is the Ye family. What are you doing? Are you deliberately offending the Ye family?" Yi Tianlei had never used such a harsh tone to treat Tang Zheng. Even when Tang Zheng did not like him, he did not do so. Looking at Yi Tianlei, Tang Zheng's heart skipped a beat. He braced himself and said, Uncle Yi, how would I dare to offend the Ye family? It's just that when I wanted to come in, they just had to stop me. The Ye family does not welcome you. Didn't they make it clear to you? Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you're strong in modification? Yi Tianlei asked loudly. Of course not. Tang Zheng flatly denied, I just can't wait to see Ding Dang. You still dare to mention Ding Dang? You still have the face to mention Ding Dang? Yi Tianlei was so angry that he could not restrain his anger as he asked. Tang Zheng was stunned. Yi Tianlei's reaction was too big. It was as if he was a different person. But he did not back down. He braced himself and said, Uncle Yi, don't be angry. I know that I made Ding Dang angry. I'm here to apologize to her. Apologize? Where did you go before? You disappeared for no reason and now you're here to apologize. What do you think my daughter is, Yi Tianlei? You want her to come and go as you please. You want to settle this with a simple apology? Yi Tianlei angrily asked. Of course not. I definitely don't have such thoughts. I had some urgent matters to attend to before. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to see Ding Dang only today. Tang Zheng patiently explained. But Yi Tianlei did not have the patience. He didn't even want to say another word to him. He waved his hand in disgust and said, there's no point in saying more. The Ye family does not welcome you and Ding Dang doesn't want to see you either. Also, I'm telling you, from now on, don't disturb my daughter. Uncle Yi, there's some misunderstanding between Ding Dang and I. It'll be fine after we clear things up. Tang Zheng explained. Misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding. Tang Zheng, I misjudged you. You're really an expert at playing with a girl's feelings. I've seen plenty of people like you. If you don't leave, then I'll beat you up every time I see you. Yi Tianlei threatened as he clenched his fists. Chapter 716. Yi Tianlei angrily glared at Tang Zheng and said, do you really think I don't dare to hit you? Tang Zheng raised his neck high, his gaze firm, clearly expressing his attitude. Fine, since that's the case, then I'll fulfill your wish. Seeing this, Yi Tianlei flew into a rage. Kacha, his fist clenched tightly. So, like lightning, his large fist struck Tang Zheng's chest. He only used 50% of his strength. He thought that Tang Zheng would dodge, but he did not dodge at all, directly taking this punch. Pang! With a muffled sound, Tang Zheng was like a sandbag, flying backwards and fiercely crashing into a tree trunk. Kacha, the tree trunk snapped in half. Pooh! Tang Zheng spat out a mouthful of blood. Although this punch was not enough to heavily injure him, he did not use his martial arts to block it. All of the power was completely absorbed by his body, so there was no need to doubt the shock to his internal organs. Why didn't you dodge? Yi Tianlei asked. Tang Zheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, I already said that I would let you hit me. Why would I dodge? Yi Tianlei was speechless, his expression changing slightly. Even though he looked angry on the surface, his heart did not feel good at all. He had always thought highly of Tang Zheng, as this kind of young elite was as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He and Ding Dang were originally a match made in heaven, but who would have thought that in the end, he would hurt his daughter's heart and even cause her to fall ill? If it was any other parent, they would be angry. Inside the room, two pairs of eyes stared at Tang Zheng through the gap in the window. When she saw Tang Zheng injured and spitting out blood, Yi Dingdang's expression changed, her snow-white teeth biting her lips. Feng Xinyang saw her daughter's appearance from the side and faintly sighed, saying, little handsome brother is actually quite good. Just punish him a bit. If this continues, there will be no way to end it. Yi Dingdang resolutely said, I have nothing to do with him anymore. What's the point? You two are really a good match. If you withdraw, wouldn't other women be taking advantage of you? Feng Xinyang persuaded earnestly. Humph, wouldn't that fulfill his wish? Doesn't he like those women? Yi Dingdang said in a bad mood. Dingdang, I won't interfere with your decision, but don't blame me if you regret it in the future. Yi Dingdang turned to look at her mother and said, You've been with Dad for so many years. Has he ever looked for other women? Feng Xinyang raised an eyebrow. If he dares, it would be strange if I didn't cripple him. Yi Dingdang smiled bitterly. If Dad can do it, why can't he? This. Feng Xinyang hesitantly said, Everyone is different. Your father isn't as capable as him. Just because he's capable, he can flirt with other women? Feng Xinyang wanted to say yes. In today's society, how many successful people are loyal to one person? But looking at her daughter's expression, she took back these cruel words. Yi Dingdang coldly snorted and said, Before, I chose to turn a blind eye. But I didn't expect that not only did he not restrain himself, he became more and more unbridled. I'm afraid he can't even count how many women he has by his side. Alright, since you've made your decision, I won't persuade you. But we can't always let him cause trouble outside. Humph, I want to see how long he can cause trouble. Yi Dingdang turned around and sat on the sofa, picked up a book and started reading. Feng Xinyang helplessly shook her head. She said in her heart, What's the point of torturing these two people? She glanced out the window and secretly said, Little handsome brother, why are you so muddle-headed? At this moment, Tang Zheng wasn't muddle-headed at all. His mind was very clear. He finally realized the seriousness of the situation. Yi Dingdang was serious this time. People were most afraid of being serious. Once they were serious, things would develop in an unpredictable direction. Tang Zheng didn't want to see such a result. He decided not to leave. He had to see Dingdang and explain things to her face to face. You really don't want to leave? Yi Tianlei was at his wit's end and asked again. Yes. Alright, then you wait. I'll see how long you wait. Yi Tianlei angrily flicked his sleeves and left. He really couldn't do anything about Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng looked towards a small room in front of him. He could confirm that there were two people looking at him in that room. One of them had a very familiar aura. It must be Yi Dingdang. However, he did not rush in immediately. He knew that Yi Dingdang was still angry, so he would wait for her to calm down. He could afford to wait. As night fell, in the courtyard of the Ye family, a person stood upright like a piece of wood. The people of the Ye family pointed at him from time to time, but Tang Zheng ignored them. He only stared straight at the room, hoping that the moment the door opened, the figure that haunted his dreams would walk out. Who is this? Why are you standing here in the dark? Scram to the side. Suddenly, a delicate voice came from behind him. Tang Zheng frowned, without even turning his head. He knew who it was, Yi Meiyu. Yi Meiyu had used a honey trap on Tang Zheng back then, but Tang Zheng did not react at all, causing her to fly into a rage out of humiliation, and she had always harbored a grudge in her heart. In addition, the good relationship between Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang's family made Yi Tianlei's position in the Ye family more and more stable, which made Yi Meiyu even angrier. Today, Yi Meiyu was in a good mood. A while ago, Yi Dingdang was seriously ill, so she was secretly happy for a long time. Previously, she went to a party and hooked up with a little fresh meat. Only then did she go home in satisfaction. However, she did not expect that not long after she entered the house, she would almost bump into someone. Her good mood was immediately destroyed, and her big mistemper immediately flared up. Seeing that the other party was silent and did not move at all, Yi Meiyu felt that she had been completely ignored. She did not recognize Tang Zheng and thought that he was just a servant of the Ye family. She immediately flew into a rage and raised the bag in her hand to smash Tang Zheng's head, shouting, I told you not to open your eyes, I want you to know how powerful I am. Tang Zheng could withstand Yi Tianlei's fist, but that did not mean that anyone could hit him. Hearing the sound of the wind behind him, he grabbed onto the other party's bag and forcefully snatched it away. With a "so" sound, the bag turned into a gust of wind and flew over the courtyard wall, disappearing without a trace. After Yi Meiyu's brain went blank for a short period of time, she completely exploded and shouted hysterically, "You dare to resist? Men, capture him and beat him up. When did the Ye family let such an ignorant fellow in?" However, no one responded to her, and no one came to stand up for her and chase away Tang Zheng. Yi Tianlei had already given the order to treat Tang Zheng as heir and ignore him. Seeing that no one came to help her, Yi Meiyu was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She rushed to the front of Tang Zheng and forcefully swallowed the vulgarities that she was about to blurt out. She stared dumbfoundedly at the face that she would never forget even if she became a ghost. "Tang Zheng, it's him. Why is he here? Is he here to look for Yi Dingdang again?" Yi Meiyu's expression changed rapidly as she ridiculed, "Oh, I was wondering who it was. So it's the famous Tang Zheng, standing in our courtyard in the middle of the night. Are you here to be our Ye family's guard?" Tang Zheng glanced at her and said, "Scram." Immediately, the mocking smile on Yi Meiyu's face froze, her face turned from red to white, and finally to ashen, and said, "Tang Zheng, this is the Ye family, it's not your place to be arrogant and despotic." Tang Zheng coldly snorted and ignored her, only staring straight at Yi Dingdang's room. Seeing that she was ignored, Yi Meiyu became even angrier. Following his gaze, she immediately locked onto the room and said angrily, "I understand now, you're relying on someone to support you, right? I, Yi Meiyu, have had enough. Today, I want to see how Yi Dingdang colluded with outsiders and came to our Ye family to be so arrogant." After she finished speaking, she rushed to Yi Dingdang's door with large strides and smashed the door, causing it to shake violently. "Yi Dingdang, come out. You're getting more and more powerful. You colluded with outsiders and came to the Ye family to behave atrociously. Do you think that the Ye family belongs to you, Yi Dingdang?" Yi Meiyu complained indignantly. There was no movement in the room. "Yi Dingdang, I know you're inside. You dare to do it but don't dare to admit it. Are you a coward?" Yi Meiyu continued to smash on the door. Tang Zheng frowned and berated, "Yi Meiyu, this is none of your business, scram to the side." Hearing the word scram again, Yi Meiyu felt as if her entire body was on fire. She turned her head and glared angrily at Tang Zheng. She could not do anything to him, especially now that Tang Zheng's strength had increased greatly. Even Yi Xuanji did not dare to look down on him, let alone Yi Meiyu. However, she could not do anything to Tang Zheng, but she was not afraid of Yi Dingdang. Moreover, she had long been dissatisfied with Yi Dingdang. With the new and old grudges added together, she completely exploded. She crazily slammed on the door, almost smashing it apart, and shouted, "Yi Dingdang, get out here. Is it fun to be a coward?" Hearing his beloved being insulted like this, how could Tang Zheng just sit back and watch? He quickly rushed to the door, grabbed Yi Meiyu's collar, and berated, "Stop." However, Yi Meiyu did not stop. Instead, she felt even more angry and humiliated, and grabbed Tang Zheng's face with her hand, shouting hysterically, "You guys are working together to bully me, I'll fight it out with you guys." Tang Zheng grabbed her hand. If he was caught, the sharp nails would definitely scratch Tang Zheng's skin, and that would be extremely embarrassing. Seeing that she was making trouble for no reason, Tang Zheng's face darkened, and he snappily scolded her, "If you don't listen to my advice, then don't blame me for being impolite. Why don't you be polite? Are you going to hit me or kill me?" "Alright, Yi Dingdang, you actually colluded with a wild man outside to kill me, you really have guts." Yi Meiyu clamored, purposely framing Yi Dingdang. The commotion caused by the two of them was too big. All the servants of the Ye family were pointing at them from afar, but no one dared to come forward to help. This involved the open and hidden struggle between the two brothers of the Ye family. They did not dare to participate. Stop. Chapter 717. Tang Zheng's hand that was holding onto Yi Meiyu froze. He stared at the person who walked out and cried out involuntarily, "Ding dang." Yi Dingdang's face was as calm as the surface of a lake without a single ripple. She coldly said, "Let her go." Tang Zheng released his hand, and when Yi Meiyu regained her freedom, her anger became even stronger. A single sentence from Yi Dingdang was enough to make Tang Zheng obey, but he actually dared to make a move on her, Yi Meiyu. The difference between them was immediately obvious. "Yi Dingdang, you colluded with outsiders to cause trouble in the Ye family. I'll fight it out with you." After saying that, he pounced on Yi Dingdang with bared fangs and brandished claws. Yi Dingdang did not expect Yi Meiyu to be so unreasonable and even dare to make a move. However, at such a close distance, even if her skills were much better than Yi Meiyu's, it would still be useless. Those long nails would definitely scratch Yi Dingdang's delicate skin, and might even leave scars and disfigure her. "How dare you?" Tang Zheng was shocked. His reaction was extremely fast as he blocked Yi Meiyu's path in a flash. Puff! Yi Meiyu's fingernails scratched Tang Zheng's neck, leaving a long mark, but it did not cut through his skin. Instead, Yi Meiyu's fingernails broke with a crack. "Ah!" Yi Meiyu let out a heart-wrenching scream. Holding onto her hand, she immediately retreated and looked at Tang Zheng in shock. She had clearly succeeded, but why was the other party not injured at all? That was impossible. However, she did not know that Tang Zheng had cultivated the primal chaos Vajra spell. Not to mention his fingernails, as long as he circulated his energy, ordinary weapons would not be able to harm him in the slightest. "You." Yi Dingdang saw that he had stepped forward bravely to protect her, and her heart couldn't help but be moved. She quickly looked at his neck, deeply afraid that something bad had happened to him. But seeing that there was no serious injury, she swallowed back the words of concern that were about to come out of her mouth. Tang Zheng turned around and looked at Yi Dingdang with a burning gaze. When their eyes met, they could feel each other's breathing. Yi Dingdang quickly lowered her head and said calmly, "You should leave. What's the point of continuing to cause trouble here? Instead, it will only make others laugh. Dingdang, listen to my explanation. There's nothing between me and Princess Anne, it's not like what you think." Tang Zheng immediately seized this opportunity and explained himself. Yi Dingdang said calmly, "What is your relationship with her? What does it have to do with me? You don't have to explain it to me. Dingdang, I know you are still angry at me. The reason why I left this time was because I had something important to do, so I left without saying goodbye. I really had no choice but to do so. I only just found out that you fell sick after I left. It is all my fault. When you were at your weakest, I was not by your side. In the future, I will definitely spend more time with you." Yi Dingdang's eyes showed some fluctuations, but her face didn't change in the slightest. She said, "I don't want to hear this. It's useless for you to say this to me. I also don't need you to accompany me. You have so many women, you can accompany them as much as you want." Tang Zheng finally knew where the crux of the matter was. She wasn't angry with Princess Anne, but his messy relationship with other women. But now that things had come to this, he had no way of abandoning other women. He couldn't do this. It wasn't because he was a playboy, but because of his responsibility as a man. He made a promise to them, so he would use his life to keep this promise. Even if there were many difficulties and obstacles, he would do it regardless of rain or shine. This was a dead end. He couldn't give Yi Dingdang what she needed. A complete Tang Zheng who completely belonged to Yi Dingdang. Looking at her expressionless face, Tang Zheng's heart ached. Even if he had the ability to reach the heavens, there was no way to resolve the current situation. Tang Zheng wasn't a domineering person. On the contrary, he was very good at taking care of other people's feelings, especially the feelings of women. He and Yi Dingdang definitely had feelings for each other. After going through so much together, their feelings for each other weren't shallow. But for various reasons, he couldn't meet Yi Dingdang's expectations. Or it could be said that Yi Dingdang had misophobia when it came to relationships. She wouldn't allow her man to be owned by another woman. She needed a complete man. Tang Zheng had a deep sense of frustration. No matter how many difficulties he had experienced in the past and how he had hovered on the edge of life and death, he had never been so depressed. Looking at Yi Dingdang's eyes in a daze, Tang Zheng asked, "Can you really not forgive this?" Yi Dingdang heard the strange emotion in his voice and raised her head. Their eyes met. Yi Dingdang's heart ached, but she still asked loudly, "How do you want me to forgive you? Do you want me to watch you fool around with other women in the future? Do you want me to sleep with other women? Yi Dingdang, can't do it. Maybe I thought I could do it in the past, but later I realized that I can't do it. My feelings can't be tarnished. My feelings for you are real," Tang Zheng added. "But it's already been divided into several parts. I need a complete one. Can you give it to me?" Yi Dingdang seemed to have thrown caution to the wind and expressed her feelings completely. Tang Zheng was speechless. He couldn't give her a complete one. This was a dead knot. Yi Dingdang looked at him mockingly and said, "You have nothing to say now, right? Since that's the case, why are you still pestering me? There won't be a result in the end anyway. I don't like things that don't end well. Are you serious?" Tang Zheng asked unwillingly. Yi Dingdang raised her head high and said, "When have I, Yi Dingdang, ever not been serious?" Yes. Back then, when she was with Tang Zheng, she was incomparably serious. Of course, now that they were going to separate, she was also serious. Although there were 1,000 voices in her heart telling her not to do this, she still insisted in the end. This was Yi Dingdang. If she compromised, she wouldn't be Yi Dingdang. "Alright, since you're so insistent, I can't do anything about it." Tang Zheng compromised. Although he was extremely unwilling, this was an unsolvable problem. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't solve it. This was because he couldn't give up on other women. "Dingdang, this is a sword that I specially chose for you. This is my final gift to you. When I'm not by your side in the future, this clear wind sword will protect you from me." Tang Zheng took out the clear wind sword. He had specially chosen it for Yi Dingdang in the Langya Pavilion because it was very compatible with the wind-chasing sword technique. Yi Dingdang looked at the clear wind sword and shook her head, "I don't need it." Tang Zheng didn't allow her to refuse and stuffed it into her hands. It was cool and gentle to the touch. Her skin moved his heart, but he wouldn't be able to touch it in the future. He reluctantly let go of his hand. Yi Dingdang looked at the clear wind sword in her hands and then looked at Tang Zheng's persistent eyes. Her heart softened and she said, "Alright, I'll accept your gift." "Thank you." Tang Zheng's lips twitched and he forced out a smile. His smile was uglier than crying and was 1,000 times more bitter as he said, "Then take care of yourself. You too." Yi Dingdang looked at him as if she wanted to deeply imprint his appearance in her mind, afraid that she would forget him in the future. They both knew that they couldn't be friends after breaking up like normal couples. They couldn't do it because their feelings for each other were too deep. When their feelings were too deep, if they couldn't have each other, they couldn't force themselves to be friends. That would be too cruel and painful. "I'm leaving." Tang Zheng took a deep breath and used all his strength to say these 3 words. Yi Dingdang nodded. Tang Zheng turned around, his legs felt as if they were filled with lead. His breathing also became heavy, as if he couldn't catch his breath. However, he did not turn around and walked out of the Yi clan's main door under countless gazes. The others could feel the strong feelings between the two of them, but fate played tricks on them. Sometimes, things just couldn't go as one wished. Only one person was overjoyed. Yi Meiyu almost jumped up in joy and laughed out loud. Yi Dingdang and Tang Zheng's relationship had always been valued by Yi Dingdang, and Yi Meiyu paled in comparison. But now that the two of them had broken up, Yi Dingdang's advantage was gone. When Yi Dingdang was sad, Yi Meiyu was happy, and incomparably happy at that. Seeing her looking at the clear wind sword in her hand in a daze, Yi Meiyu mocked mercilessly, "What's so good about a broken sword? No one wants it even if it's a piece of scrap metal. Yi Dingdong's expression changed. Swoosh, the treasured sword was unsheathed, the sword intent soared into the sky, the bright sword tip was pointed at Yi Meiyu's throat. If it moved another inch, it would pierce through her throat. Yi Meiyu looked as if she had been immobilized. She immediately raised her hands and exclaimed, Yi Dingdang, what are you doing? If you dare to insult this sword again, and insult Tangzheng again, I will use this sword to kill you. Yi Dingdang said with killing intent. Yi Meiyu's entire body trembled. She could see a strong killing intent in Yi Dingdang's eyes. If she dared to speak rudely again, she had no doubt that Yi Dingdang would kill her. I don't dare, I don't dare. Yi Meiyu immediately begged for mercy. Humph. Yi Dingdang snorted coldly. Just as she was about to put away the clear wind sword, a figure appeared beside her, his finger brushed against the sword, and praised, good sword, a rare treasure sword. This ghost-like person was the patriarch of the Ye family, Yi Xuanji. Yi Meiyu was so embarrassed that her cheeks flushed red. Just now, she had said that the sword was a piece of scrap metal, but now, the patriarch praised it as a treasure sword. However, no one cared about Yi Meiyu's embarrassment anymore. Yi Tianlei and Feng Xinyang also walked over. Feng Xinyang's eyes were moist. Looking at her daughter, her heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. However, in the end, their gazes were still attracted by the clear wind sword, and their eyes could not help but light up. The two of them did not use weapons, but they still had good eyesight. This clear wind sword was definitely the best treasure sword they had ever seen in their lives. This is too precious. Yi Tianlei exclaimed. Dingdang, can I take a look? Yi Xuanji asked for his opinion. Yi Dingdang nodded. When Yi Xuanji received the clear wind sword, his expression changed greatly. The clear wind sword was as light as air. He had never heard of such a sword before. Immediately, he knew that he had underestimated the value of the sword. This was not an ordinary treasure sword, but a peerless treasure sword. It was a divine weapon that countless warriors yearned for even in their dreams. Tangzheng walked past her in a daze, not even looking at her. Tangzheng, what's wrong with you? And no longer called Tangzheng an immortal, but called him by his name. Tangzheng ignored her. In fact, deep down in his heart, he still blamed Princess Anne. If not for her arrival, he would not have ignited the fuse and caused Yi Dingdang to leave him. However, deep down in his heart, he also understood that he was just twisting words and forcing logic to excuse himself. At the end of the day, the crux of all of this was him. If he did not have so many romantic debts, Yi Dingdang would naturally not have left him. Therefore, he forcefully suppressed the disappointment and anger in his heart and did not lose his temper at Anne. And looked at him with a strange expression. How could she, who was extremely smart, not see through Tangzheng's abnormal reaction? There's a problem. Didn't he go to see Yi Dingdang? Could it be that he had a conflict with Yi Dingdang? And guessed. If there's anything, you can tell me. I can also help you solve your problems. And volunteered and blocked Tangzheng's way. Tangzheng casually pushed her away and pressed his hands on her chest. However, the moment he touched her, he pulled away without any improper thoughts. Princess Anne immediately froze. She watched as Tangzheng entered the bedroom and closed the door. Her mind was still blank. He actually touched my chest. She, who had been pampered since she was young, had never been taken advantage of by other men. She had a strange feeling in her heart. However, Westerners were much more open-minded in this aspect than Easterners. She did not really hold Tangzheng responsible for this matter. She only looked at the closed door with a complicated expression. Her hand couldn't help but rub the place where Tangzheng had pushed her. Inside the room, Marshall was originally lying on the bed. She thought that Tangzheng would not come back tonight, so she felt a little disappointed. However, when she saw that Tangzheng had returned, she jumped up from the bed like a carp, but when she saw Tangzheng's expression, she was stunned. She had been with Tang Zheng for so long, but she had never seen such an expression on his face. It was as if he had lost his soul. Wu's heart skipped a beat as a strong sense of unease and worry welled up within him. She quickly supported him and asked, "What happened to you?" Tang Zheng shook his head and said, "I'll rest for a while." After he finished speaking, he laid down on the bed, his eyes wide open as he stared at the ceiling. Wu was shocked and quickly touched his forehead. He didn't have a fever, but his dark and lifeless eyes made her feel confused. "Tang Zheng, just what happened?" She snuggled up to the bed and stared at him as she asked. Tang Zheng stared at the ceiling, his eyes gradually turning red. The emotions that he had accumulated all the way finally exploded as he said involuntarily, "Ding Dang and I have broken up." Hiss. Wu was so shocked by this news that she sucked in a breath of cold air, her entire body trembling. She was very clear about the inextricable entanglement between Tang Zheng and Yi Dingdang. One had to know that when Wu first met Tang Zheng, Yi Dingdang was by his side and was even being chased by Wu together. Therefore, the two of them shared life and death. This friendship was something that ordinary people would find difficult to achieve. In fact, Wu had to admit that his position in Tang Zheng's eyes was definitely not as high as Yi Dingdang's. However, the two of them had actually broken up. This was no different from a bolt from the blue. Why? Why is she so stupid? Wu asked in disbelief. She really wanted to reach the position that Yi Dingdang had in Tang Zheng's eyes, but that was not something that could be achieved in a short period of time. She did not expect that Yi Dingdang would have such a great advantage, but would voluntarily withdraw. "It's not that she's stupid, it's that I'm a bastard. I'm too greedy." Tang Zheng muttered. He was indeed greedy. He couldn't bear to let go of any woman beside him unless they took the initiative to leave him like Yi Dingdang. Then there was nothing he could do. Of course, after he urged her to stay, he wouldn't pester her. That wasn't his style. Everyone had their own choices. Even though he was extremely reluctant, he still respected the other party's choice. Wu blinked and roughly guessed what was going on. However, he still asked, "You're so good, how could she bear to leave you?" Everyone has their own principles and perseverance. It's different. Tang Zheng shook his head and said absent-mindedly. Looking at his pained expression, Wu did not gloat. She had lost another competitor. Instead, she felt heart-wrenching pain. Because if Tang Zheng was in pain, she would be in 100 times more pain than him. She couldn't help but hug Tang Zheng into her embrace, allowing his head to lean against her full chest. She gently stroked his head and said, "I won't leave you. I'll never leave you." This was a decision she had made a long time ago. At this moment, she couldn't help but say it out loud. It was extremely natural and there wasn't the slightest bit of inconsistency. Tang Zheng's heart moved. He raised his head, looked at her beautiful face, and asked, "Really?" Wu nodded heavily without hesitation. "Absolutely." Tang Zheng squeezed out a smile, closed his eyes, and fell asleep. During this period of time, he was simply too tired. His nerves were highly concentrated, and his body and mind were exhausted. After experiencing the unforeseen event with Yi Dingdang, his body and mind were even more exhausted. He couldn't help but fall asleep in Wu's embrace. Wu's embrace was very warm and soft, giving him an unprecedented sense of peace. Wu was slightly startled. Looking at him sleeping soundly like a mischievous boy, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but reveal a smile. He hugged him even tighter, pressed his face against his face, and smelled the scent of his body. His heart was exceptionally satisfied. Early in the morning, the first ray of sunlight shone in through the window. Tang Zheng opened his eyes in a daze. Why is it so soft?" He rolled his eyes and discovered that he was actually lying in Wu's embrace. His head was resting on her chest, and that beautiful hemisphere had been pressed to the point of being deformed. He suddenly realized what had happened last night. He had actually fallen asleep just like that. She had hugged him all night. He slightly got up, wanting to crawl out of her embrace, but heard a groan. Wu Yuyu woke up, and when she saw Tang Zheng on her chest, her face immediately flushed red. She looked flustered and stammered, "You're awake." Tang Zheng squeezed out a smile and said, "Yes, I'm awake." After saying that, he quickly got up from her body. "Thank you for last night. You should have woken me up. You must be exhausted after sitting like this for an entire night." "I'm fine. Seeing how tired you are, I can't bear to wake you up." Wu Hou did not finish her sentence. In fact, she also enjoyed the feeling of Tang Zheng lying in her embrace. If the two of them could lie together like this for the rest of their lives, it would be a great blessing. "Last night, Wu said hesitantly. Tang Zheng waved his hand and said, "Everything is in the past. A new day, a new beginning." Obviously, after a night of adjustment, Tang Zheng's emotions had recovered by 70 to 80%. As a man, he would not be so wishy-washy as to immerse himself in pain. That was not his style. No one who was decisive enough to kill would do that. "I'm going to class today. You can arrange your own time." Wu nodded in agreement. Opening the door and walking out, Princess Anne immediately stared at the two of them with a thought-provoking gaze. Last night, the two of them had actually slept in the same room. She did not need to waste her brain cells to guess what had happened. In fact, in the middle of the night, she really wanted to listen to the corner of the wall. However, she had renovated the room and the soundproofing effect was too good. She could not hear anything. Looking at Wu's exhausted appearance, Princess Anne understood tacitly. She thought that the two of them must have tossed and turned for the entire night. Her eyes subconsciously looked towards Tang Zheng's lower body. Chapter 719. Princess Anne did not have the chance to gossip about what Tang Zheng and Marshall did last night because Tang Zheng directly left after washing up. Princess Anne immediately chased after him but found that he had already disappeared. She could only fiercely stomp her feet to vent the dissatisfaction in her heart. Early in the morning, Tang Zheng returned to room 502. His roommates were still sleeping soundly. When they saw Tang Zheng, they all jumped out of bed as if they had seen a ghost. They circled around him a few times and said, "Old three, this time you disappeared for so long. Are you all right?" Tang Zheng gave a knowing smile and shook his head saying he was fine. TSK, old three, this time you played too big. Yi Ding Dang is very angry with you. You have to think of a way to calm her down." Tang Zheng's expression darkened and said, "I broke up with her." Broke up? The three of them were all shocked as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at him in disbelief and said, "Old three, you can't be serious, right?" "It's true," Tang Zheng said solemnly. The three of them looked at each other in dismay. They had always thought that Tang Zheng and Yi Ding Dang would walk together in the end. Yi Ding Dang's valiant and heroic appearance was not something an ordinary person could handle. But they never thought that fate would make a fool of them and the two of them would break up. The three of them secretly sighed and patted Tang Zheng's shoulder. They said with a heavy tone, "Old three, a real man does not have to worry about not having a wife. Even if you give up this big tree, there is still a forest." Tang Zheng did not want to continue this topic and asked, "Did anything happen in school recently?" "Oh, there is one thing. Professor Qi Shaoan has resumed teaching." Tang Zheng nodded his head as this was expected. Back then, with the help of Princess Anne, Qi Shaoan was exposed so that the villains behind him could no longer plot against him. Professor Qi naturally recovered his position and work. The other things are not big, but the island nation next door has an earth-shattering event. "Do you know?" Tang Zheng nodded calmly. "Serves him right. I wonder which ferocious person is so powerful. If I see him, I'll really have to bow 3 times to him." Tang Zheng smiled bitterly. "There's no need for that." "How is it not necessary?" "It's very necessary. You don't know how many Huaxia people worship this fierce person. However, This person's identity is too secretive. Normal people can't find out anything about this person. The three of them said regretfully. Tang Zheng shook his head and smiled bitterly. He didn't expect that his impulsive actions would win him so many fans even though the country was in a passive position. That person might have just done it casually. He didn't think too much about it at that time. Tang Zheng said casually. Third brother, this is something you don't know. This kind of brave warrior naturally plans before taking action. How could he not think of so many things? It's just that the various governments are definitely investigating this person's identity. If it's exposed, it will definitely be dangerous. What's there to be afraid of if there's danger? That hero is so powerful, who in this world can hurt him? Yes, he's number one in the world, invincible in the world. The three of them were impassioned, cheering for this idol they had never met. Looking at this scene, Tang Zheng laughed strangely. In the end, his laughter grew louder and louder. The three of them looked at Tang Zheng strangely and said, Third brother, although we said that hero is the best in the world, you're not bad either. We definitely don't mean to belittle you. Yes, absolutely not. You're our good brother. You're different from that hero. The others echoed. Tang Zheng clutched his stomach and laughed until he couldn't straighten his back. He looked at the three of them strangely and asked, Do you really want to see that person? Of course, I want to see him even in my dreams. The three of them nodded like they were pounding garlic. Suddenly, Zhou Yan had an idea. Third brother, we know that you know a lot of strange people. Could it be that you know this hero? In an instant, the other two also looked at Tang Zheng with eyes full of anticipation. Tang Zheng pretended to smile mysteriously and said, Is this person really that important to you? Of course, my idol. I didn't chase after stars before, but ever since I saw his feats, he's my idol. Sinosaurus patted his hard chest and said solemnly. Alright, then I'll reveal the mystery. Your idol is far away in the horizon, but right in front of you. Tang Zheng raised his hands and said to himself. Is my idol here? Where is he? The three of them looked at each other in dismay and swept their eyes around, trying to find traces of their idol. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pointed to himself and said, Isn't the one standing in front of you me? It's you. The three of them didn't understand for a moment, but as soon as they finished speaking, the three of them opened their eyes wide and stared straight at Tang Zheng. As if they had just woken up from a dream, they said, Third brother, you're saying that our idol is you? You're that fierce person. Tang Zheng smiled and nodded his head in acknowledgement. This was not something he did on a whim. A long time ago, he had the thought of helping his roommates become cultivators. However, at that time, the cultivators were weak and were being chased by the martial sect. If he let them become cultivators, it would be like pushing them into a fire pit. Of course, Tang Zheng couldn't do such a thing to his friend, so this plan was put on hold. He specially refined a type of elixir, the energy cultivation pill, and let his roommates eat it as snacks. Unknowingly, the three roommates' bodies had undergone earth-shattering changes, but they were completely unaware of it. The energy cultivation pill could cleanse one's marrow and improve one's physique, making the body more suitable for cultivation. The three of them were completely unaware that they had received such a huge benefit. They just kept glaring at Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng smiled at the three of them. Finally, the three of them confirmed that Tang Zheng was not joking. Moreover, Tang Zheng rarely joked. His idol was actually his roommate, Lao San. Damn, Lao San, you disappeared for no reason this time because you went to the island nation. Sinosaurus exclaimed as he punched Tang Zheng's chest. The other two woke up from their stupor and said, Lao San, you're awesome. We always knew that you were very powerful, but we never thought that you would be this powerful. Idol, so Lao San is an idol. Come, everyone must hug one together. I dream of hugging an idol. The four of them hugged each other. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the three of them. After a while, he retracted his smile and said seriously, "Boss, Lao Si, I want to tell you a secret. Are you willing to keep it a secret?" Wang Shiji and Zhou Yan looked at each other and nodded. Of course, we're not big mouths. Sinosaurus's expression changed slightly. He glanced at Tang Zheng and guessed his thoughts. Sinosaurus had already become a cultivator by chance. Now, if the other two brothers could also become cultivators, then the four of them would roam the world together in the future. How exciting would that be? Just thinking about it made him so excited that he couldn't sleep. This is a very big secret. I didn't tell you before because I was afraid that you would be in danger, but now that things are different, the situation has changed drastically, telling you might not be a bad thing. Moreover, all the decisions are in your hands, I will respect your choice. Tang Zheng said seriously. Seeing Tang Zheng being so serious, Zhou Wang and Wang Shiji's expressions gradually became serious as they listened attentively to Tang Zheng's explanation. There are 3 types of people in this world. One is an ordinary person, and the other is a martial artist. You are relatively familiar with these 2 types of people, but there is a 3rd type of person that you have never heard of. What is the 3rd type of person? The two of them asked curiously at the same time. Cultivator. Tang Zheng said resolutely, cultivators are very different from the first 2 types of people. When their strength is cultivated to the extreme, they can move mountains and overturn seas. A single person can resist thousands of soldiers and horses. In short, this kind of person's strength seems to have no upper limit. It is completely beyond the imagination of ordinary people. The two of them were dumbstruck. This information had completely overturned their previous understanding. Zhou Yan had an idea. He stared at Tang Zheng and asked, "Lao San, then you are a cultivator?" Tang Zheng nodded truthfully, "Not only am I a cultivator, Lao Er has also been a cultivator for a long time." Lao Er? Their gazes immediately locked onto the tall Sinosaurus. Sinosaurus scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "Lao San and Lao Si, don't be angry. We didn't tell you the truth this time because we had no choice. Moreover, I only became a cultivator at the beginning of this semester. All of this is thanks to Lao San, otherwise I would have lost my life long ago." F***CK, doesn't that mean that we have 2 cultivators in our dorm? Of course. Tang Zheng nodded and added, "Furthermore, how many cultivators we have in our dorm in the future will depend on your attitudes." The two of them were not idiots. They immediately realized the crux of the matter and quickly asked, "You mean that the 2 of us can also become cultivators like you, and have the ability to move mountains and fill seas? I have already made preparations for you. Do you still remember the pills I gave you before? That is the Peiyuan Dan, it has already transformed your bodies. In the future, your cultivation will be twice as fast with half the effort." Tang Zheng explained. Peiyuan Dan. Not only Wang Zhou and Zhou Yan, even Sinosaurus had a face full of surprise as he exclaimed, "The little bean-like thing you gave us before was actually a pill to help us improve our physique. You're being too good to us. We're all brothers, so this is what we should do. Lao San, Lao Si, then discuss it and see if you're willing to become a cultivator." Zhou Yan asked, "Are you saying that we can gallop around the world like you in the future?" "Of course. But why did you tell us before? What exactly happened to the situation? It's hard to explain in a few words. But one thing is certain, the world of the past will never return. Cultivators will quickly rise in this world and have a place for themselves." Tang Zheng said resolutely. Although he was not willing to bring back the cultivators of the sky beyond heaven, it did not mean that he did not welcome other cultivators. If the other party was a native cultivator of this world, then he would definitely welcome them with open arms. Chapter 720. In the face of such a good thing, Zhou Yan and Wang Shiji agreed without any hesitation. Every man yearned to become stronger from the bottom of his heart and had a dream of becoming a hero. Now that the opportunity was right in front of him, wouldn't he be a fool if he didn't seize it immediately? Tang Zheng immediately taught them the basic knowledge of cultivation, and also taught them the god-killing method that he had taken out from the Langya pavilion. After that, the four of them went to class. After experiencing the continuous battles of the island nation and returning to the peaceful life of a university, Tang Zheng's heart couldn't help but calm down. Furthermore, he had delayed too many classes, so he had to make up for it as soon as possible. Although going to school was only a kind of experience for him, he still took it very seriously. The other students were already used to Tang Zheng's elusive appearance. This archaeology department, or even Yenqing University's anomaly, was far from what others could compare to. During this period of time, he was prepared to stay in school for a while. Moreover, with Princess Anne at home, he would definitely be harassed when he went back. In addition, he had originally planned to meet Lu Qingmei, but she seemed to have transformed into a workaholic and was still on a business trip. As for the company, with Mu Hongyan overseeing it, he did not need to ask about it. Proportion as a result, he became the most idle person. Of course, this was only on the surface. He still had a lot of things to do. This island nation experience had given him a lot of inspiration and benefited him a lot. Every battle that he had experienced was worth reflecting on. This was very beneficial to his cultivation. In addition, he had already cultivated to the 9th level of Anidia, and was only a step away from the Oris core stage. This was a very critical moment. He had to cultivate well and condense a golden core. This was an extremely important period for a cultivator. If he failed to condense a golden core, then he would be rejected from entering the golden core stage. He would no longer have the opportunity to improve his cultivation, which would undoubtedly be a fatal blow. Furthermore, the higher the quality of the condensed Oris core, the faster his future cultivation would be. After class, the few of them ate dinner together. Just as they were about to return to the dormitory, they were stopped by Yi Dingdang's roommates. The three women were like three tigresses who came to denounce them. They already knew that the two of them had broken up. Of course, they believed that Tang Zheng had abandoned her and hurt Yi Dingdang. Fortunately, his roommate came to his rescue, and Tang Zheng was finally able to escape from the women's battle of words. Of course, he did not blame the three of them. They stood up for Dingdang, and this kind of friendship was rare and precious. It made him feel gratified for Dingdang. He walked around the campus aimlessly, looking at the lush trees and the various teaching buildings hidden under the big trees. He realized that he had not seriously strolled around the campus, and the school was so unfamiliar to him. Thus, he strolled around the campus alone, like a lonely traveler, blending into the beautiful scenery of the campus. Unknowingly, he arrived in front of an office building. He suddenly remembered that Professor Qi Shaowen's office was inside, so he walked in. When he opened the door, he found that the room was full of documents. Professor Qi was buried in all kinds of documents, and his thin body was almost buried by the documents. He flipped through all kinds of documents as if there was no one around. His expression was sometimes excited, sometimes depressed, like a madman. Tang Zheng was shocked. Didn't Professor Qi already return to work? How did he become like this? He looked even more down and out than before. Professor Qi. Tang Zheng called out softly. Professor Qi did not raise his head and said, "You're a delivery man, right? Put the food on the table. The money is on the table, take it yourself." Delivery? Tang Zheng was stunned and looked at the table by the door. There was indeed money on the table, and the trash can beside it was full of fast food boxes. He didn't even have time to go out for a meal, and he stayed in the office all this time. Tang Zheng was shocked. This was like going crazy. He strode over and snatched the documents from his hands. Professor Qi resisted and tried to take them back, but when he raised his head and saw Tang Zheng's face, he was stunned and said, "Tang Zheng, why are you here?" Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Professor Qi, what's wrong with you?" "I'm fine. I'm just researching." "There's no need to be so crazy about researching. Your body can't take it." "What's wrong with this?" "When I was young, I did research for days and nights without sleep. Tang Zheng looked at the bony Professor Qi and shook his head. But you're not the same as when you were young. Professor Qi turned a deaf ear and said, Tang Zheng, you came at the right time. I've made some new discoveries recently, and I'm sure you'll be interested. Professor Qi, it won't be too late for you to rest first. Looking at his appearance, Tang Zheng was worried that he would collapse at any moment. Professor Qi was in high spirits and said, what's the point of resting? That's just a waste of time. Why don't you take a look at this? Professor Qi pulled out a picture from a pile of documents. What is this? Tang Zheng took it and looked at it. It was a bronze mask, and he felt a sense of déjà vu. He suddenly slapped his head as he finally remembered where this feeling came from. When Professor Qi gave him his first class, he brought a bronze mask. Tang Zheng also saw a flow of air in the mask. This flow of air was pure spiritual energy, and after absorbing this spiritual energy, his true qi actually increased. Not only that, if the spiritual energy was abundant enough, it could also nourish the 9 revolving pill furnace and increase its quality. In short, this spiritual energy was too important. Later on, he saw a similar antique in Old Wei's antique shop, Imperial Treasury. Later on, he found out that these antiques were ancient sacrificial tools, but after that, he never saw another similar antique again, so Tang Zheng forgot about it. He never thought that he would see it again today. Moreover, it was clear that the bronze mask in this picture was different from the one he saw before. Seeing Tang Zheng's expression change, Professor Qi proudly said, Haha, I knew you'd be interested. Professor Qi, did you find this kind of mask again? Tang Zheng curiously asked. Professor Qi nodded, of course. Actually, this is a big surprise. Oh, why do you say that? Tang Zheng was also interested. One day, someone went to Old Wei's Imperial Treasury to sell antiques, and one of the items was this mask. Old Wei remembered that you liked this kind of thing, so he bought it on the spot. However, there was a pleasant surprise, and that was that there was another item, which was this. Professor Qi flipped through another photo. This was a painting that had been taken. On it, there was a rough outline of a scene. This was the construction of a palace. The palace towered into the clouds, and the materials were very large. Giant stones and giant trees, giving people a very shocking feeling. In front of the palace, there was a tall altar, and according to the scale of the picture, this altar was the size of 10 football fields. A group of people stood on the altar, densely packed, but the appearance of these people could not be seen clearly because each of them was wearing a bronze mask. Hiss! Tang Zheng sucked in a breath of cold air. With so many bronze masks, how much spiritual energy did they contain? If they were to absorb it, then the effect would be too great. How is it? Professor Qi stared at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze, and asked with a bit of pride. Tang Zheng suddenly raised his head and stared at Professor Qi, is this picture real? Professor Qi nodded seriously, this is a documentary picture, and everything in the picture should be compared to the real thing. Although the things in the picture are too shocking, I believe that it is real. Tang Zheng also had this kind of intuition. There are many parts of Huaxia's history that are not very clear, and it is intermittent. Especially the ancient era, it is basically blank, and many of them are filled in by myths, as if someone is deliberately hiding the history of the ancient era. However, that period of history is often very fascinating to historians, but there has been no strong evidence to prove or study that period of history. This painting gave me an idea. Perhaps this is the key to unlocking that magnificent and mysterious period of history. Professor Qi's eyes were shining, and his thirsty look made people unable to help but laugh. Ancient era. Tang Zheng subconsciously muttered. He remembered Qi Yu, 100 Change Star Lord, weren't they people from the ancient era? They definitely knew about that history, and now Tang Zheng's body had the heart of Qi Yu, he also urgently wanted to know about that history. In addition, he was also a Skywalker, and Qi Yu was also a Skywalker. How did Skywalkers come to be? What secrets did Skywalkers have? Modern people couldn't answer, but maybe if they traced back to the ancient era, they would be able to find something. Are you interested? Professor Chi asked. Tang Zheng nodded. Where is the person who sold these antiques? Professor Chi's face darkened. Gone. Gone. Tang Zheng was disappointed. How can you let him go? This is a big discovery. Professor Chi said helplessly, I also asked Old Wei the same thing, but at that time he didn't completely discover the value of these antiques, so he didn't let the seller stay, and according to Old Wei, the seller didn't come with good intentions, he was not a good person. Tang Zheng didn't care, he himself was not a good person, why would he be afraid of evil people? Since Old Wei has seen the seller, then let's go find him and see if we can find any useful information. Also, these antiques must be with him. I can also go and take a look, Tang Zheng said impatiently. Professor Chi's face lit up with joy. Okay. The two of them immediately took the photos and rushed out, heading straight to Old Wei's imperial treasure house. At dusk, the two of them finally arrived at their destination. They saw Old Wei sitting at the door with his legs crossed and a cup of tea in his hand, looking at the people coming and going. There were still a few customers in the shop, but with the waiter taking care of them, he didn't need to worry about them. When he saw the two of them, Old Wei put down the cup of tea and quickly walked over. He couldn't help but look at Tang Zheng with joy. Young Master Tang, what a rare guest. Old Wei, you are wrong, we have been friends for more than 10 years, you are not as friendly to me as you are to Tang Zheng, Professor Chi joked. Chapter 721. After the host and guest sat down, Tang Zheng impatiently took out the photo and asked, Old Wei, is this still with you? Old Wei immediately beamed with joy and said, of course it is. When young Master Tang was interested in this kind of thing, I took note of it. This time there was a seller selling it so I directly bought it. Saying this, he directly took out a bronze mask from a wooden box. Tang Zheng took the mask and was overjoyed. This was indeed the thing he was looking for. On top of the mask, there was a flow of spiritual energy. When his hand touched the mask, the spiritual energy quickly merged into his body and turned into true qi. Seeing Tang Zheng's pleasantly surprised expression, Old Wei's heart finally fell to the ground. Those in the antique business made friends with people from all walks of life. Of course, there was no lack of trouble. If he could have a strong helper like Tang Zheng, then there would be less trouble in the future. That was why Old Wei spent so much effort to befriend Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng, what do you think? Professor Chi curiously asked. Tang Zheng suddenly raised his head and handed the mask to Old Wei and nodded, this is it. Professor Chi smiled and said, I told you my eyes were right. Wasn't it because I recognized it first? Otherwise, it would have slipped away from under my nose. Old Wei said as if he wanted to take credit. Professor Chi said, you've got good taste this time, all right? We came here for more important things. Old Wei smiled mysteriously and blinked, I already guessed that you would come looking for me. Oh. Professor Chi raised his eyebrows, you can even predict? Then why don't you tell us why we came looking for you? Old Wei's finger tapped on the bronze mask a few times and said with a mysterious smile, you came to ask about the origin of these things? Didn't you say you didn't know? Professor Chi asked. Ha, is there anything in the antique business that I don't know? Old Wei boasted. So you know. Then why did you say you didn't know when I asked you last time? Professor Chi glared at him and asked. Old Wei wagged his finger and said, see, I don't understand your fiery temper. If I had told you back then, it might not have been a good thing for you. Now that young Master Tang is back, it's a different story. Professor Chi frowned and said, what exactly are you up to? Seeing that Tang Zheng was also listening attentively, Old Wei did not keep him in suspense. He coughed lightly and said, listen carefully, the sellers of these things are not good people. They are grave robbers. Grave robber? Tang Zheng and Professor Chi cried out in alarm at the same time. As a serious ancient examiner, they hated tomb robbers very much. For the sake of benefits, these people wantonly destroyed ancient tombs and cultural relics. Many of the ancient tombs that they stole were in a mess, and many of the precious cultural relics were destroyed. Tang Zheng was very excited. If they could really solve many of the ancient secrets, or the secrets of the Skywalkers, then it would be very important to him. It was even more important than increasing his cultivation by a few levels. Professor Chi rubbed his palms together and said, "So you're saying that we have to follow them all the way, like the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind?" Old Wei nodded, "Of course." "Then hurry up and tell us the location. We will follow those damn tomb robbers." "Old Chi, don't be so anxious. If you act too hastily and alert the enemy, then the gains won't make up for the losses." Old Wei hurriedly advised, "This group of people won't leave the capital so soon. They're still preparing. When they are about to leave, I will inform young Master Tang, and he will follow them." "I want to go too." Professor Chi volunteered. Old Wei frowned, "Old Chi, you are not a young man anymore. You will definitely not be safe if you follow those tomb robbers. Are you sure your body can do it? It will be bad if you cause trouble for young Master Tang." "No, I have to go." Professor Chi insisted. The temptation this time was too big. Professor Chi couldn't resist at all. Looking at his stubborn eyes, Tang Zheng's heart moved. "It's okay, I will take care of you when the time comes." Professor Chi had helped him so much, so how could Tang Zheng leave him alone? Even if it was a little more burden, he didn't care. In fact, Tang Zheng had another idea in his mind. Why don't he just directly knock on their door and force them to tell him the location of the ancient tomb? But after thinking about it, these tomb robbers still had accomplices, so he had to cast a long line to catch a big fish and catch them all in one fell swoop. He couldn't let any fish escape the net, otherwise it would be a disaster for the archaeological world. Seeing that Tang Zheng had agreed, Professor Chi was ecstatic. He shook Tang Zheng's hand excitedly. Old Wei helplessly shook his head and could only agree. "Oh right, take out that painting and let Tang Zheng take a look," Professor Chi urged. Old Wei took out another painting. This painting was already somewhat damaged. Tang Zheng glanced at it and found that there was no movement of spiritual energy, but seeing the painting with his own eyes, he still felt deeply shaken. The towering palace, the huge altar, and the mysterious sacrificial ceremony all exuded a mysterious aura. This painting doesn't have any spiritual energy. It seems that not everything in the ancient tomb contains spiritual energy. Tang Zheng came to a conclusion. He wasn't disappointed. Instead, he felt that it was normal. If everything contains spiritual energy, it would be an unimaginable amount. After chatting for a while, he left and went back to wait for Old Wei's news. Since there were still a few days before departure, Tang Zheng decided not to return to the dormitory. He decided to use this time to calm down and cultivate. Where was the best place to cultivate in the capital? Of course, it was the Imperial City. Moreover, his dragon god technique had made a breakthrough and he had gained a lot in the Langya Pavilion. It was a good opportunity to communicate with the five-clawed golden dragon. The Imperial City was particularly quiet at night. Without the hustle and bustle of tourists during the day, it was like a sleeping lion. He went to the bottom of the Imperial City with ease and saw the five-clawed golden dragon. However, the five-clawed golden dragon complained to him. This was because he didn't bring Xiao Bai with him. The five-clawed golden dragon seemed to have established a deep friendship with Xiao Bai. Although the five-clawed golden dragon still didn't understand Xiao Bai's origins. However, the five-clawed golden dragon's attention was attracted by Tang Zheng's cultivation. In just a few days, Tang Zheng had risen several levels. More importantly, his dragon god technique had actually reached the third level. The five-clawed golden dragon's huge eyes widened. Although it had already expected this, it was still shocked by this rocket-like speed. He chattered and excitedly said that he would see the light of day soon. After it calmed down for a while, Tang Zheng talked about what he had seen and heard in the island nation. When he mentioned the Yamata no Orochi, the five-clawed golden dragon's eyes immediately lit up. It exclaimed, "You saw the Yamata no Orochi?" Seeing his big reaction, Tang Zheng was quite curious and asked, "Yes, isn't it said that the Yamata no Orochi almost transformed into a nine-clawed golden dragon? It's more powerful than you, right?" The five-clawed golden dragon nodded and said, "Of course it's more powerful than me." This matter caused quite a stir in the dragon clan. If such a murderous Yamata no Orochi transformed into a dragon, it would be the greatest irony and insult to the dragon clan. However, wasn't he destroyed by a mysterious person in the end? So, your dragon clan should thank this person. Tang Zheng joked. The five-clawed golden dragon nodded seriously, "Yes, but do you know who this person is?" Chapter 722. Seeing Tang Zheng shake his head, the five-clawed golden dragon smiled as if he had already expected this reaction. He solemnly said, "This person is the first emperor of the human world, Qin Shi Huang." Qin Shi Huang. Tang Zheng was startled. Anyone who studied history would know this person. In the past, Huaxia was filled with warlords and 7 countries roamed freely. Qin Shi Huang established a prosperous era and destroyed the 6 countries, unifying the world. From then on, Huaxia entered a new era. So he was the one who broke Yamata no Orochi's dream of transforming into a dragon. Tang Zheng sighed. This generation's hero was truly extraordinary. Of course, this matter was not recorded in history. Let me tell you, the Qin Shi Huang that you humans know is only the tip of the iceberg. You don't even know his true identity. Why was he able to destroy the 6 countries and unify the world? At that time, the world was filled with experts. What did he rely on to accomplish this? The five-clawed golden dragon continued to ask. Tang Zheng was confused. How could he know these things? At that time, Huaxia was filled with cultivators. Each country had a large number of experts. You can imagine how terrifying that battle was and how powerful each country was. But Qin Shi Huang was able to accomplish this in a short 10 years. What he relied on was his identity. What identity? Tang Zheng's eyes shined as he asked. A celestial. What? A celestial? Tang Zheng was shocked. He almost jumped up. How could there be another celestial? Qi Yu was a celestial. How could Qin Shi Huang also be a celestial? Ha, you're also a celestial. How could you be scared? The five-clawed golden dragon laughed. Tang Zheng helplessly smiled. It was precisely because he was a celestial that he was scared. The identity of a celestial was filled with too many unknowns. Is being a celestial not good? How many people dream of being a celestial? The five-clawed golden dragon disapprovingly said. You said that Qin Shi Huang's identity as a celestial had something to do with unifying the world. What is the connection? Tang Zheng changed the topic. The five-clawed golden dragon unhappily glared at him, and said, Of course it has something to do with it. Skywalker's cultivation speed is extremely fast, they are blessed by the heavens, they will always do something that will shake the heavens and shake the earth. This is destined to be an extraordinary life. What is so strange about unifying the world? Then why didn't he live a long life? The five-clawed golden dragon sighed and said, A celestial's cultivation is profound, and their lifespan is naturally not short. However, Qin Shi Huang unified the world and killed who knows how many people. The sin of killing was too heavy, and it harmed the harmony of the heavens. The heavens punished him, and even though he was a celestial, he couldn't live to 100 years old. You should know that he sent people everywhere to search for the immortal recipe for immortality, but in the end, they still found nothing. This is his fate. Tang Zheng sighed faintly. A prodigy of a generation had fallen just like that. However, the matter of killing caused Tang Zheng to become vigilant, and he asked curiously, isn't the world of cultivators a place where the strong preys on the weak? Why can't we kill? Of course you can. The five-clawed golden dragon said, it's just that Qin Shi Huang's sin of killing is too heavy, the number of people who died in his hands is no less than 1,000,000. This kind of sin of killing is not something that the heavens can tolerate. With 1,000,000 lonely souls haunting him, ordinary people would have died a long time ago. It is already commendable that he could live for so long. Tang Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. This did not affect him much, he was not a homicidal maniac, how could he kill so many people? Moreover, he was not in a hurry to save people, especially to the general public, he was still benevolent. Since Qin Shi Huang was so powerful, why didn't he directly kill Yamada no Orochi and let it escape? The five-clawed golden dragon snorted and said, you think too simply, do you know how powerful Yamada no Orochi was when it transformed into a dragon? In this world, except for Qin Shi Huang, there is no second person who can do this. Moreover, Qin Shi Huang was haunted by 1,000,000 lonely souls and his strength was greatly reduced, so dealing with Yamada no Orochi was already very difficult. Letting Yamada no Orochi escape was also something that he had no choice but to do. Tang Zheng sighed regretfully and said, what a pity. If we had killed Yamada no Orochi back then there wouldn't have been so many things after that. Perhaps there wouldn't have been so many deaths in that war a few decades ago. Everything in the world, every bite and every drink, has its own destiny. How can there be so many perfect things? The five-clawed golden dragon said. In the next few days, Tang Zheng attended classes during the day and cultivated in the imperial city at night. His cultivation improved more and more, but he was still a step away from the Oris core stage. However, his cultivation had already been completely consolidated and he had also digested the gains he had gained during this period of time. Especially the changes in the War Soul sword, he was pleasantly surprised. The black spots on it were getting fewer and fewer, and the dazzling sword body was slowly being exposed, as if it was undergoing a transformation. During this time, Yan Luyan invited him to a meal and even went to Ji Wuxiang's clubhouse. However, this time, he did not see this mysterious Ji Wuxiang. Tang Zheng's relationship with the Yan family was getting deeper and deeper. Tang Zheng also found out another thing, and that was that the Ye family seemed to be walking together with the Song family again. Back then, because of the marriage between Song Yu and Yi Dingdang, the two families were at odds with each other. Who would have thought that they would be close again today? Yan Luyun directly evaluated that there were no eternal enemies between the great families, only eternal interests. The two families had come together again because they had a common interest. In this way, among the four great families in Beijing, the Yan family was isolated. The Yi and Chu families and the Song family had joined forces, and the Song family's strength had taken a qualitative leap. They were already able to contend with and even suppress the Yan family. Looking at Yan Liuyun's indignant expression, Tang Zheng thoughtfully said, "Young Master Yan, please pass on a message to Elder Yan. If there is anything I can help with, I will do my best." Yan Luyun was overjoyed. He had been waiting for these words. The Yan family had placed all their chips on Tang Zheng. Of course, they hoped that he could return the favor and repay them. Currently, these words were full of rewards. Tang Zheng obviously knew the Yan family's thoughts, but he did not reject them. People always needed allies, and this ally of the Yan family was very important to him. After coming back, he had been contacting Tian Chanzi. This old man seemed to have disappeared from the world. There was no news, and he was helpless. Of course, he also contacted Fang Shishir. She was doing well abroad, and the Rockefeller family did not do anything to her. Everything was very peaceful. Mu Hongyan personally came to the school to report the company's operation situation to him. Everything was going well. With the cooperation of the Yan family, everything was going smoothly. Moreover, Linger was also doing well in the entertainment circle. Since the incident with Ji Wuxiang's club last time, Linger's path to stardom had been smooth. Releasing albums, shooting movies, everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Her popularity had soared, and she was already recognized as a rising star in the entertainment circle. However, there were also things that occasionally caused ripples in Tang Zheng's heart, and that was when he bumped into Yi Dingdang a few times on campus. However, Yi Dingdang completely treated him as air, brushing past him and never looking at him again, causing him to sigh. He had already been repeatedly urged by the five-clawed golden dragon to bring Xiao Bai to the imperial palace. In order to not listen to its nagging, Tang Zheng decided to go home once. Moreover, he specifically chose to go home during the day in order to avoid meeting Princess Anne. When he opened the door, as expected, he did not see Princess Annie. Marshall and Lil White were both at home, and when they saw him, a hint of pleasant surprise flashed through the depths of Marshall's eyes. Like a little wife who had reunited after a long time, they warmly welcomed him. Xiao Bai jumped onto his shoulder, hugged his head and kept scratching it, as if complaining that he had not come back to play with it during this period of time. I came back this time to bring Xiao Bai out, Tang Zheng said. When Xiao Bai heard this, he was extremely happy and squeaked non-stop. A hint of disappointment flashed across Wu's eyes. So he didn't come to see him. Tang Zheng immediately saw through her thoughts and hurriedly held her hand and said, I missed you too. I came back to see you. Wu's eyes immediately surged with intense joy as he looked at him with a burning gaze. Tang Zheng's gaze inadvertently landed on Wu's hand. The huge scar immediately attracted all of his attention. He patted his head. He was truly muddle-headed. How could he forget about this matter? The scars on Wu's hands and chest were like ugly centipedes lying on her fair skin. It was a ghastly sight, and every time he saw it, it was like torture. There was no need to mention it to Wu. He had already said that he would remove these scars for her, but he had actually forgotten about it. There was no time like the present. He had to settle this matter today. Seeing him staring straight at his hand, the scar was shocking. Wu was shocked. As if he had been electrocuted, he immediately retracted his hand and hid it behind his back. His face became somewhat pale. Letting the person she loved see her ugly place was something that no woman was willing to do. Wu was no exception. Wu, I'll heal you right now and remove these scars. Tang Zheng grabbed her hand again, his fingers gently brushing across the scar. Wu's entire body trembled unnaturally, but when he felt Tang Zheng's tenderness, he could not bear to break free. When the two of them returned to the bedroom, Tang Zheng immediately activated his true qi to wrap around the scar, slowly melting the blood clots in the scar. The scar disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, but after that, no matter how much true qi he activated, he was unable to completely remove the scar. Tang Zheng was not depressed, because Tian Chanzi had once said that the scar would need to be healed many times before it could be completely removed, so there was no need to rush it. Seeing that the scar on his hand had been healed, Tang Zheng's gaze subconsciously fell on Wu's chest. Wu's beautiful face could not help but turn red. In order to heal the wound on his chest, he had to take off his clothes. Although the two of them had skin-to-skin contact, it was still embarrassing. Let me help you, Tang Zheng said gently, but from the corner of his eyes, he caught a glimpse of Xiao Bai staring at him with wide eyes. He immediately kicked it into the bedroom and could not help but laugh as he scolded, You little pervert, you still want to peek? Where is your place? Bang! The door closed, leaving only the two of them in the room. Wu could not help but laugh, and said, How would Xiao Bai know about those things? Don't think so badly of it. Don't be fooled by its pure appearance. It knows no less than you. Come, move your hand, I'll take off your clothes. Tang Zheng said carelessly, and did not avoid it. His hands naturally landed on the buttons. Chapter 723. The buttons were like little fairies, lightly jumping out of the buttonhole. The shirt was torn open, and the whiteness inside could be clearly seen. Wu's face flushed red. She wished she could find a hole to hide in. Killing enemies on the battlefield was not as uncomfortable. But in order to get rid of that ugly scar, she could only endure it. She secretly sized up Tang Zheng and found that his eyes were as clear as water, without the slightest bit of desire, just like a doctor treating a patient. She could not help but heave a sigh of relief, but also feel a little disappointed. Not long later, Marshall's chest was completely exposed in front of Tang Zheng's eyes. Although he had seen it a few times, it was still so beautiful that it could captivate one's soul. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and gently covered his chest with his palm. The warm and delicate feeling caused his heart to ripple. True qi gushed out and wrapped around the wound. The warm feeling made Marshall feel comfortable and even more alluring. Tang Zheng calmed himself down with great difficulty and managed to suppress the impulsive demon in his heart. Only then did he complete the healing process. The scar had already faded. After a few more treatments, it would definitely recover to its original state, perfect and flawless. Marshall could not help but look down at her chest, her beautiful eyes shining. The effect was immediate and she could not help but exclaim, "How magical." Tang Zheng smiled and said, "Of course it's magical. After a few more treatments, it will be completely healed." After saying that, he could not help but swallow his saliva. The temptation was too strong. Seeing his appearance, Marshall's cheeks flushed red. She hurriedly grabbed her clothes to cover her chest and said coquettishly, "You're not allowed to look." This action of wanting to welcome and rejecting was extremely flirtatious. Tang Zheng's originally restless flame immediately jumped up, and he threw her onto the bed and said, "I want to see." "Ah, you." Marshall was shocked. She covered her chest with both hands, completely losing her usual cold-killing intent. "Quickly get up. It's broad daylight. What if someone sees us?" "Hee, what are you afraid of in broad daylight? Who would look?" Tang Zheng laughed sinisterly. "No way." Wu Yan firmly refused, but before he could finish, his lips were sealed by Tang Zheng's mouth. It was not as violent as a storm, but was exceptionally gentle. Wu's heart immediately softened as she recalled the kiss on the island nation. Just a single kiss had almost melted her body and mind. It was the same this time. This kind of gentle kiss made her unable to resist at all. Although she was usually decisive, when it came to matters between a man and a woman, she reacted strangely to this kind of gentleness and was especially sensitive. When the conditions were right, success came naturally. There was no storm-like attack. The two of them were like a river flowing into the ocean, merging into each other's bodies, and even their souls. After a long time, the wind stopped and the rain stopped. Tang Zheng hugged the naked Marshall and took a deep breath. After this round of exchange, he had absorbed a lot of pure yin qi. He realized that after his cultivation had greatly increased, the speed at which he absorbed pure yin qi had also become faster. Of course, the pure yang qi in his body had also increased even faster. The harmony of yin and yang had temporarily reached a fragile balance, but it could be broken at any time. "How's your pure yang qi?" Wu Qingqiu laid on Tang Zheng's chest and asked with concern. Tang Zheng rubbed her smooth jade back and said with a smile, "With you here, the pure yang qi will not be able to rebel. It has long been tamed by you." Wu Xian was embarrassed. She fiercely pinched the muscles on his waist and said angrily, "You're really bad." Creak. Suddenly, a clear sound caused the two of them to immediately fall into silence. The two of them had excellent hearing and could easily hear the commotion outside the door. They looked at each other and whispered, "Why is there someone here? It must be and who came back? She's not at school in the middle of the day, so why did she run home?" Tang Zheng said unhappily. Marshall was both embarrassed and anxious. She fiercely pinched Tang Zheng and said, "It's all your fault, doing such shameful things in broad daylight. Now that you've been caught, how am I supposed to face her in the future? Anyway, she knows about our relationship. What are you afraid of?" Tang Zheng simply beat her at her own game and distanced himself from Anne. "No, hurry up and jump out of the window." This height won't be a problem for you. Wu Kai refused and quickly pushed Tang Zheng out of the bed. Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he stood naked on the bed and complained, "Is there a need for that?" "Yes," Marshall said decisively. Crack. But just as he finished speaking, the door was turned and the door was pushed open. Princess Anne stood at the door and said, "You're home." Ah! Before she could finish her sentence, her voice turned into a scream. Her eyes stared straight at Tang Zheng's body. F***ck. Tang Zheng felt a chill on his back and reacted quickly. He immediately crawled back into bed and shouted, "What are you doing?" Marshall was already stunned. He quickly covered his head with the blanket and began to deceive himself like an ostrich. Anne's scream was finally interrupted, but her eyes still looked as if she had seen a ghost. She stared at the messy bed and exclaimed, "You too, in broad daylight, close the door. You're invading my privacy, do you know that?" Tang Zheng roared in annoyance. And seemed to have awoken from a dream as she slammed the door shut. She clutched her chest as her heart pounded violently. She was a princess and had lived in the West since she was young, so she definitely had some education in this area. However, this was the first time she had seen a real man's body, so she was naturally quite frightened. However, her nerves were still very tenacious. After a while, she came back to her senses and smacked her lips. "Everyone says that Eastern men can't do it. I don't think they're that bad." Inside the room, Tang Zheng carried Marshall out of bed. "Everyone's gone. What are you hiding in there for? It's all your fault. If you woke up earlier, everything would have been fine." Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't over yet. However, he was at a disadvantage. She had actually seen it all. He had suffered a great loss. Since it has already happened, there's no point in running away. It's not like there's anything wrong with it. Moreover, this matter is her fault. She barged into someone's room and didn't respect their privacy at all. Tang Zheng said righteously. Anyway, I'm not going out today. If you want to go out, then go out." Marshall grabbed the blanket to cover his body and said resolutely. "You're not even afraid of going into battle to kill the enemy. What's there to be afraid of?" Tang Zheng didn't understand her. "How can that be the same?" Marshall asked. Tang Zheng was helpless and said, "All right, if you don't go out, I'll go out. I want to see what she can do to me." Tang Zheng's skin was thick. How could he be scared by a woman to the point that he didn't dare to leave the room? Dressed neatly, he walked out as if nothing had happened. Seeing and staring straight at him, he took the initiative and said, "And, do you know what privacy is? You are seriously invading my privacy." As expected, when she heard the word privacy, Anne immediately apologized, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were at home, and I didn't know you were doing that. Otherwise, I definitely wouldn't have barged in. This is my fault. I apologize." Her sincere attitude made Tang Zheng feel a little embarrassed. Tang Zheng resentfully waved his hand and said, "Since it's your first offense, I won't pursue it. Why don't you go to school in the middle of the day and run home? You're still talking about me. Aren't you at home too?" "I don't have class today." Princess Anne rolled her eyes and said, "I don't have class either. You promised to bring me around the capital last time, but you still haven't fulfilled your promise." Tang Zheng was shocked. "You've already seen the matter between me and Marshall, why are you still sticking to me to bring you around the capital?" "When did I promise you?" Tang Zheng refused. "Last time I told you about Yi Ding Dang." Hearing the 3 words Yi Ding Dang, Tang Zheng's mood immediately dropped, and said, "I didn't promise you, that's what you said." After saying that, he returned to his room and bid farewell to Marshall. Marshall also wished that he could leave quickly, otherwise, it would be awkward if Anne saw him. Tang Zheng brought Xiao Bai and left amidst Anne's angry denunciations. In the next few days, Tang Zheng took the time to treat Marshall's injuries. Those scars finally disappeared and she regained her former beauty. When Anne saw this change, she was so shocked that her chin almost fell to the ground. She understood the international biomedical information very well, especially the treatment of scars. There had never been such an immediate effect. This was simply a miracle in the history of medicine. She kept asking Tang Zheng how he did it, but Tang Zheng completely ignored her and directly slipped away, causing Anne to stomp her feet in anger. The peaceful days were short-lived. Old Wei's call finally came, informing him that the grave robbers were ready to leave. It was just a group of grave robbers, so Tang Zheng did not put them in his eyes, so he left Little White in the imperial city to accompany the five-clawed golden dragon. Marshall also stayed at home to cultivate the fire underworld palm. Ever since he had seen the actual power of the fire underworld palm, he had been training even harder. Driving to the school to pick up Professor Chi, he found that he had prepared a lot of things. It was obvious that he had made sufficient preparations during this period of time. Is there a need to be so exaggerated? Tang Zheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Professor Chi nodded seriously. Of course there is. This time, we are going to the wild, and we are exploring an ancient tomb. There are only the two of us, and we don't know what kind of unexpected situation we will encounter, so we have to be fully prepared. Alright. But there's no need to carry so many bags. I'll keep them for you first. Tang Zheng waved his arm and all the luggage disappeared into thin air. Professor Chi was flabbergasted. Although he already knew Tang Zheng's identity and knew that he had a lot of divine arts, he still couldn't help but be shocked when he saw this move. The two of them arrived at the place where they had agreed to meet up with Old Wei. Old Wei had been waiting for a long time and quickly came forward to welcome them. Seeing the two of them empty hands, he frowned and said, "Are you going to go empty-handed like this?" "The luggage is with him." Professor Chi pointed at Tang Zheng. Old Wei looked at Tang Zheng with a strange expression. Tang Zheng didn't want to explain and asked first, "Where are the grave robbers?" Tang Zheng handed over the money and documents. The boss looked at the two of them deeply, went through the registration procedures with a straight face, and then handed the two of them 2 access cards. There was no need to expect any service from the owner of such a small hotel. Anyway, the two of them didn't care about that. They took the room card and went upstairs. "Which room are they staying in?" Professor Chi asked in a low voice. "The 3rd floor, right next to us. They've booked 3 rooms." Tang Zheng's hearing was excellent. The soundproofing of such a small hotel was not very good. He could already vaguely hear the grave robber's voice. However, the other party deliberately lowered their voices, so he couldn't hear what they were saying. "Sigh, it's such a waste for the two of us to get 2 rooms." Professor Chi looked at the room card in his hand, came back to his senses, and muttered. Tang Zheng smiled slightly, but did not explain the reason. The last time he entered the 100,000 Mountains with Professor Chi and the others, he had a deep impression of Professor Chi. He especially liked to snore. It was earth-shattering and made it difficult for people to sleep. He didn't want to endure that kind of destruction again, so he deliberately booked 2 rooms. After they entered their rooms, Tang Zheng was a little tired after driving all the way. He ate a little and went to sleep. In a daze, he was suddenly awakened by a noise, mixed with Professor Chi's exclamation. Tang Zheng jumped out of bed like a carp and quickly opened the door, only to see a lot of people crowded in the corridor. They blocked Professor Chi's door and were shouting fiercely. Tang Zheng's heart tightened. Could it be that something happened to Professor Chi? He quickly squeezed through the crowd and shouted, "Make way, make way." Finally, he squeezed through the door, only to see Professor Chi being forced into a corner by a few people. His clothes were messy, and there was a woman sitting on the bed with her hair blown dry. This woman had heavy makeup and an extremely short skirt, revealing 2 white thighs. Seeing this scene, Tang Zheng was stunned. What was going on? "Old man, you look so serious, but your mind is so dirty." Seeing that my sister is beautiful, you want to take advantage of her, right? Let me tell you, if you don't give us an explanation today, don't even think about leaving. A bald man roared fiercely. The bald man was shirtless, and there was a big gold chain around his neck. Coupled with his big pockmarked face, it was obvious that he was a gangster. Tang Zheng was confused. How could Professor Qi have a conflict with this group of people? Moreover, the woman on the bed was too eye-catching. What the hell was going on? But no matter what, he had to save Professor Qi first. Professor Qi was so angry that his face and ears were red. He glared at them and retorted hoarsely, "You're slandering me. It's obvious that you're the ones who controlled the girl to do those dirty things. I want to call the police. I want the police to arrest you." Professor Qi's voice was loud and righteous, but it made the group of people's eyes shine fiercely. They shouted unscrupulously, "Where did this old man come from? You dare to call the police? When the police come, don't even think about pleasing them." When Tang Zheng heard this, his heart suddenly lit up, and he finally guessed that the woman was actually a young lady who came out to sell herself, and Professor Qi was. Impossible, with Tang Zheng's understanding of him, other than being obsessed with archaeology, this old man would not have much interest in women, let alone at his age, he would not be able to do anything, and his taste would not be that low. This was a trap, an immortal's trap. Although Tang Zheng had never really encountered it, he had made many friends with people from all walks of life. He still knew a little about this kind of dirty trick. Perhaps, the two of them had been targeted since they entered the hotel. The boss must have been in cahoots with this group of people. When he saw that the two of them were foreigners, he had evil intentions. He must have thought that the old man was easy to fool and chose to target Professor Qi. Tang Zheng's face sank. This group of people was really King shameless. They actually dared to target Professor Qi. This old man had done research all his life and must have valued his reputation very much. Now that he was slandered as a prostitute, it would be worse than death. Tang Zheng did not delay and rushed over with large strides. The few burly men only felt their bodies sway and were pushed aside. The next second, they saw a young man standing in front of the old man. The bald man stared and disdainfully said, "Oh, you actually have an accomplice. So what? This old man bullied my little sister. If he doesn't give an explanation, no one can step out of this door." Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear and supported Professor Qi. "Professor Qi, what is going on?" Hearing Tang Zheng call him professor, the bald man became even more arrogant. It was as if he had eaten stimulants. He shouted loudly, "So it's still a professor? A beast with a human face? I think it's more like a beast. If you don't give me an explanation, I'll go to your unit and ask for an explanation." The bald man was an experienced person. He was ecstatic. This time, he had really picked up a treasure. This kind of person was most afraid of people going to his unit to cause trouble. In order to keep the peace, he had to give enough lottery tickets. The bald man's eyes were red. It was as if he could see a sky full of money flying towards him like a fairy scattering flowers. Professor Qi indignantly explained the whole story. It turned out that when he was resting, he suddenly heard someone knocking on the door. When he opened the door, he saw a woman with heavy makeup. The other party rushed into his room without saying anything and tried to sell him her services. Although Professor Qi was obsessed with research, he still knew that the other party was a woman who had lost her virginity. Although this group of people often appeared in the news, it was the first time he had seen it. It was very fresh. Of course, he definitely did not have any improper thoughts. He just felt that the other party was very pitiful, so he tried his best to persuade her to take the right path. He even promised to find a job for her when he returned to Beijing. He never thought that his love would harm himself. The door was pushed open with a bang, and then a group of people surrounded him fiercely. They insisted that Professor Qi was an old man who did not respect himself and bullied a woman. Professor Qi was a scholar who met a soldier. He could not explain himself clearly and was unable to defend himself. He was said to be useless by the other party. His part-time job was to call a beast with a human face but a beast's heart. Seeing Tang Zheng, Professor Qi's heart finally returned to his stomach. He grabbed Tang Zheng's hand and explained, "Don't believe their words. I'm really wronged." Tang Zheng smiled coldly and glanced at the people opposite him. "Of course I know you're wronged. This group of people came with ill intentions. They're obviously here to extort money. Professor Qi, you've been fooled." Professor Qi's face was bitter. Although he was a titan in the archaeological world, he was helpless in the face of these things. He said dejectedly, "Then what should we do?" "Pay up. You have to pay up." The bald man shouted first. "Professor Qi, sit on the chair and rest. I'll take care of it." Tang Zheng comforted him. He turned his eyes and saw a few familiar faces at the door. It was the group of grave robbers. One of the grave robbers pointed at the dejected Professor Qi and whispered to him. Tang Zheng's heart trembled as he had a bad premonition. As expected, the grave robber looked at Tang Zheng and Professor Qi warily, then turned around and left. "I've been exposed." Although Tang Zheng did not know how the other party found out, he was still exposed. This matter was troublesome. However, he did not have time to chase after them. He was stopped by the bald man and a group of people. Each of them was like a pack of wolves, staring at Tang Zheng with glowing eyes. "Want to escape? No way. Close the door." Chapter 725. The group of people glared at Tang Zheng and Professor Qi as if they were lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They wanted to say a few words to keep up appearances, but Tang Zheng did not give them a chance. Like a fierce tiger coming down the mountain, he rushed into the crowd with a whoosh. With a raise of his hand and a fall of his fist, one by one, they immediately turned into pig heads. Tang Zheng pulled Professor Qi up and shouted, "Let's go." The two of them swaggered out of the room, leaving only a mess in the room and the woman who was sitting on the bed dumbfounded. Where are they? However, when the two of them came downstairs, they found that the grave robber's car was gone. Without a doubt, the other party must have noticed something and slipped away without stopping. Professor Qi was dumbfounded. It was as if a basin of ice water had been poured over his head. His enthusiasm turned to nothing. He stomped his feet in hatred and said regretfully, "It's all my fault. Why should I be so kind? Now that the person and the car are gone, how am I supposed to follow them?" Tang Zheng's face was sullen as he looked around. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes slightly and stared at a sneaky person in the distance. He strode over. The other party immediately wanted to hide behind the counter, but in the end, Tang Zheng dragged him out. "Boss, you were the one who led the people upstairs, right?" Tang Zheng asked with a fake smile. 8 less than or equal to the boss was so scared that he trembled. He had secretly run upstairs to take a look. When he saw the defeated soldiers wailing on the ground, his blood almost froze. He knew that this time, he had kicked an iron plate. The other party was not a harmless lamb, but a fierce dragon crossing the river. He had been running this hotel for quite some time. He served people according to their needs and occasionally used unskilled methods like badger jumping to extort tourists. It was a tried and tested method. He did not expect to fail miserably this time. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about." The boss pretended to be confused and shook his head. Slap. Half of the boss's face immediately swelled up. Seeing that Tang Zheng was about to slap him again, the boss was so scared that he shouted, I'll tell you everything. It's my fault this time. I shouldn't have hurt you. I'm a bastard." Tang Zheng hurriedly stopped his endless nonsense and asked straightforwardly, "Where did that group of people go?" The boss shrunk his neck and stuttered. Tang Zheng glared at him. The man was so scared that he spilled the beans. "They went west." "West?" Tang Zheng looked at the dark road ahead. There were many cars on it. Looking for the 3 cars in the dark was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Professor Chi was filled with regret and hatred. He looked into the distance, his lips twitching. Tang Zheng also frowned. Without a direction, this group of people would completely lose track of them. How would they find the ancient tomb then? Seeing that Tang Zheng was silent, the boss was afraid that he would vent his anger on him, so he reminded him, "So you're looking for those people. They're not easy to deal with." "Huh?" Tang Zheng moved his head and asked, "Do you know them?" "No, I don't." The boss hurriedly shook his head. "But they used to live here. I can tell they're not easy to deal with. Also, they have a smell on them." "Smell? What smell?" Tang Zheng asked curiously. The boss stuck out his tongue and said in surprise, "The smell of death." "Huh?" Tang Zheng was suddenly curious. He could see that the yin energy on those people was very strong, but he did not smell the smell of death. Seeing that Tang Zheng was very interested, the boss wanted to make up for his mistake and said, "People in that line of work all have that smell. Normal people can't smell it, but I've been here for so many years. I've met who knows how many groups of people like this. I've long known them." "Oh, what do you think they do?" "Excavators." The boss smiled slyly. Tombstone was also a tomb robber. This boss really had some experience. "Then do you know where they went?" "If you can tell me, then I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair." "Yes." The boss was convinced. "I'll tell you. They went to Qinling." "Qinling?" "Yes, there are many ancient tombs there. It's simply a paradise for these people. Who knows how many people go there every year. Moreover, many people have poured out treasures from there." Professor Chi's eyes lit up when he heard the 2 words Qinling. He slapped his head and said, "Why didn't we think that they went in that direction? It must be Qinling. Since they said there's a huge ancient tomb, then Qinling fits the description." Tang Zheng knew little about this. Seeing that Professor Chi was so certain, he believed him. He asked the boss with a cold face, "Qinling is so big. Do you know where they went?" The boss said with a bitter face, "How would I know? If I had the ability, I'd be excavating too." "You still want to excavate?" Tang Zheng was furious. The boss knew that things were not going well. He cried out in panic, "I don't dare, I don't dare." He paused for a moment, then added, "But recently, there have been a few groups of people going there. In the past, there weren't so many people at this time. They must have found something. You'll definitely find some clues if you go there." Tang Zheng and Professor Chi looked at each other. Professor Chi nodded, apparently agreeing with this person's point of view. Seeing this, the boss looked at Tang Zheng expectantly. Tang Zheng threw him to the ground and fiercely said, "I'm warning you, if you dare to do this kind of thing in the future, your in will be your end." As soon as he finished speaking, the boss saw a ray of light shoot up into the sky and land on top of the hotel. Then, everything returned to normal. He saw the 2 people get into a car and drive away. The boss patted his chest with lingering fear and spat. He curled his lips and said, "You're scaring me. Do you think I'm scared? You're a dragon crossing the river, but there are always small shrimps. If I don't trick them, they'll have nothing to eat." The last word turned into a scream, but it was quickly drowned out by a loud rumbling sound. The scream came to an abrupt end. He stared with a pair of dead fish eyes at everything in front of him. His mind was blank, and his whole body was trembling. It was as if there were countless swords hanging over his head. The hotel collapsed. It was a mess. The group of big men were crying and screaming as they struggled to climb out of the ruins. Since they had a destination, Tang Zheng and Professor Chi were not in a hurry. In order to save time, the 2 did not look for another hotel to stay. Instead, they drove straight to Qinling. Qinling was a huge mountain range that stretched from east to west in the middle of Huaxia. It was like a huge dragon lying on the earth of Huaxia. It was also known as the Dragon Vein of Huaxia civilization. Along the way, Professor Qi tirelessly filled Tang Zheng in on the knowledge of the Qinling Mountains. There had always been many ancient and great tombs in Qinling. However, due to the restrictions of the terrain, the mountains were too steep. There were also many unknown ancient tombs buried here. This caused the tomb robbers to run rampant. They even used gunpowder to open the mountains and blow up the tombs, destroying countless cultural relics. Professor Qi sighed and said hatefully, "If we catch all these tomb robbers, it will definitely be a great merit for the inheritance of Huaxia culture." Tang Zheng did not comment. This was a whimsical idea. Human nature sought benefits and avoided harm. If there was profit, there would definitely be people who lost their humanity and took risks. After more than a day of trekking, the undulating mountains gradually appeared in their sight. This mountain range was not as dangerous as Mount Hua, but it had another kind of charm. The undulating mountains were more shocking than the hundreds of thousands of mountains in southern Yunnan. Professor Qi got out of the car, put his hands on his waist, and pointed at the mountains in the distance. He said, "Look, this is the Dragon Vein of Huaxia. It's so beautiful." "Professor Qi, is there any basis for the Dragon Vein?" Tang Zheng asked on a whim. "This is a ruling method of the ancient kings. They deliberately increased the mystery of Qinling. How can there be dragons in this world?" "Of course, there is no Dragon Vein," Professor Qi said firmly. "Dragon." Tang Zheng immediately saw the flaw in Professor Qi's words. There were dragons in this world, so the Dragon Vein might not be a groundless rumor. What exactly was a Dragon Vein? Tang Zheng could not help but have this question in his mind. But in the end, no one could answer this question. Close to Qinling, there were many more villages, hotels, and restaurants. There were obviously more people. In recent years, the tourism industry had developed, and many explorers had come to conquer this mysterious mountain range. Tang Zheng and Professor Qi decided to find a place to stay for the night and recharge their energy, especially Professor Qi. After all, he was old. After such a long journey, although he was still very excited on the surface, it was difficult to hide the deep fatigue between his brows. Moreover, he could also use the rest time to inquire about the whereabouts of the grave robbers. The two chose a hotel that seemed to be more reliable to stay in. After eating at the restaurant next door, Tang Zheng left Professor Qi to rest in the room and walked out. However, this time, just in case, the two of them only booked a standard room. Tang Zheng could only endure Professor Qi's snoring for the time being. Strolling through the village, Tang Zheng saw that there were quite a few foreigners. The inns and restaurants were filled with quite a few foreigners. Some of them were clearly backpackers, while others made Tang Zheng frown. These people were more or less tainted with some yin energy. Although they were dressed as backpackers, how could they escape Tang Zheng's sharp eyes? He walked around the village vigilantly, but he did not find the group of grave robbers. However, he saw a few other groups of grave robbers. This was really a paradise for grave robbers, a disaster area for Huaxia civilization. After a night of silence, Tang Zheng endured Professor Qi's bombardment. Professor Qi once again regained his vigor and kept urging Tang Zheng to quickly enter the mountain. Since the group of grave robbers was not in the village, then they must be impatient to enter the mountain. If the grave robbers had arrived a step earlier, who knew how many cultural relics would have been destroyed? Chapter 726. The Qinling Mountains were not as steep as the Huashan Mountains, but they were continuous and lush. It was easy for people to lose their way. In this vast mountain, once one lost their way, it was not an exaggeration to say that they would eventually be trapped to death. The two of them had been on the road for half a day. The road under their feet changed from a main road to a winding path. In the end, there was no way to go. There were thorns and vines in front of them. If Professor Chi came alone, he would have been unable to move an inch. However, with Tang Zheng, everything became easier. The War Soul Sword was overkill. With one strike, the thorns and vines were defeated. The two of them easily shuttled through the vast mountain. They were much faster than the average person. Bang! Suddenly, a clear gunshot echoed in the mountain forest. It was particularly ear-piercing. Professor Chi shrunk his head and was shocked. He exclaimed in a low voice, "There are enemies." Tang Zheng looked up as if nothing had happened. In the distance, he saw a figure flashing in the dense forest. The gunshots did not stop. They came sporadically, making people nervous. Grave robbers? Professor Chi also looked around. He smacked his lips and asked. Most likely. These people are really desperate. They even prepared guns. Tang Zheng sighed. Arrogant. Professor Chi scolded fiercely. Let's go. Anyway, we haven't found any clues. Since we met grave robbers, let's follow the clues and see if we can find them. Tang Zheng suggested. Professor Chi did not disagree. He said, later, you will make a move and teach these criminals a lesson. Tang Zheng smiled and ignored Professor Chi's scholarly attitude. After a while, the two of them passed through the layers of obstacles and approached their destination. The gunshots had stopped. Tang Zheng and Professor Chi hid in the bushes. Not far from them was a group of fierce desperados. Many of them had guns in their hands. Some of them had machetes and other weapons. There were several corpses lying on the ground. The leader of the group, a scar-faced man, kicked the people on the ground, spat and cursed, "You bunch of shrimp soldiers and crab generals dare to touch that ancient tomb. Humph, you are courting death. I will send you to see the King of Hell first." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand and swung the knife down, leaving a bloody wound on the other party's neck. That person twitched a few times before he died. Professor Chi was so scared that he exclaimed in a low voice. He knew that something was wrong and quickly covered his mouth. However, it was too late. The enemy had already found out. The scar-faced man shouted, "Who is it?" His subordinates had already taken action and arrived in front of the bushes with their guns pointed at the two of them. "Boss, we caught 2 people. Stand up and don't move. If you dare to move, I'll shoot you to death," the grave robber roared fiercely. Tang Zheng cast a comforting look at the frightened Professor Chi. The two of them slowly stood up. The scar-faced man walked over and stared fiercely at the two of them. His small eyes rolled around, and the machete in his hand was pointed at the two of them. He asked, "Who are you?" "I." Professor Chi wanted to speak, but he was interrupted by Tang Zheng. "We are tourists. We heard that the scenery in Qinling Mountain is beautiful, so we came to take a look." Tang Zheng had already carefully scanned this group of people. He did not find the grave robbers he was looking for. This meant that they were not in the same group. However, the ancient tomb that the scar-faced man had mentioned had aroused Tang Zheng's interest. Could it be that this group of grave robbers had also come for that ancient tomb? He was going to wait and see. He wanted to get some information from the other party. Seeing that Tang Zheng was dignified and neither servile nor overbearing, the scar-faced man laughed fiercely. "Boy, don't think that I am a fool. You want to fool us with such a clumsy lie. Humph, you are daydreaming." Tang Zheng did not care. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Oh, then what are you going to do?" "What am I going to do?" "Humph, you saw what we did just now. Of course, I am going to send you to see the King of Hell," the scar-faced man said murderously. Tang Zheng was unmoved. He said, "I have seen the King of Hell a long time ago. I don't want to see him today." When he fought with the King of Hell in the ghost realm, he was no stranger to him. When the others heard this, they laughed sarcastically. "This boy is scared silly. Boss, just kill him. We still have business to do." Tang Zheng turned a deaf ear to them and asked, "Where is the ancient tomb that you are talking about?" F***CK, I am the one asking you. You dare to ask me? Damn, are you not afraid of death? Then I will fulfill your wish. The scar-faced man waved his machete. Tang Zheng frowned. This group of people was not cooperating. It seemed that they were going to use force. Bang, 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 however, a series of fierce gunshots interrupted his thoughts. The scar-faced man was shot between his eyebrows. Blood flowed out. His eyes were wide open as he fell to the ground with grievances. The others were beaten up by this sudden attack. However, in the end, they could not escape the scythe of death. They fell to the ground one after another. On the contrary, Tang Zheng and Professor Qi stood in place unscathed. Tang Zheng's expression was calm. Professor Qi looked at so many dead people. He was already pale with fright. Professor Qi, I am here. Don't be afraid. Tang Zheng comforted him softly. Professor Qi heard this and his trembling body slightly stopped. Who is it this time? Professor Qi asked with trepidation. They will know when they come out. Tang Zheng said indifferently. In this kind of rain of bullets, it was not difficult for him to escape. However, he did not want to reveal his strength immediately. Moreover, this group of people who suddenly attacked were stronger. He wanted to see who they were. Rustling footsteps sounded in the woods. More than 10 people walked out. Tang Zheng's pupils suddenly shrank. He was secretly delighted. His target had appeared. He found the few grave robbers he had been following in the crowd. However, these people were obviously not the leader. One of them, an old man in his 50s with a goatee, caught Tang Zheng's attention. This was because he was too different from the others. Everyone else had a strong yin qi, but he was no different from an ordinary person. There was no yin qi around him at all. However, the occasional fierce light in his eyes still made Tang Zheng judge that this person was not an ordinary person. As the saying goes, a dog that bites does not bark. This old man was the dog that bites. He was much more powerful than the other people who looked fierce. This person seems to be the leader of the grave robbers. However, there is no yin qi on him. How can a person who has been drilling into graves for many years not be surrounded by yin qi? Could this old man have a way to resolve it? It was extremely unusual to be able to resolve the yin qi. Tang Zheng stopped underestimating him. The grave robbers surrounded them. More than 10 guns were aimed at the two of them. One of the grave robbers whispered a few words in the old man's ear. The old man looked surprised. His gaze went past Tang Zheng and circled around Professor Qi. Tang Zheng looked at him curiously. The person who whispered to the others in the inn was also the grave robber just now. Could it be that he had found some clues? The old man walked over and looked at Professor Qi with burning eyes. The famous Professor Qi Shaoan has graced us with your presence. What a surprise! Ah! Professor Qi let out a cry of surprise. The other party had actually seen through his identity. This was too unexpected. Tang Zheng suddenly understood. No wonder the grave robbers in the inn had escaped. It turned out that one of them had seen through Professor Qi's identity. Professor Qi was a titan in the archaeological world. It was not strange that the grave robbers could recognize him. Because of Professor Qi's prominent identity, the grave robbers must have thought that he was an official. They thought that the police had targeted them, so they ran away without stopping. Seeing Professor Qi so surprised, the old man looked around and shouted, "Police friends, you want to catch me, Wu Lao? Then please show yourself. How can you hide so sneakily?" There was no response from the dense forest. Wu Lao frowned and said, "Could it be that you are showing yourself because there is going to be blood?" Professor Qi is a titan in the ancient examination world. If anything happens to him, you will not be able to bear the consequences. There was still no response. Professor Chi shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about? Where did the police come from?" Wu Lao Air stroked his goatee. His eyes flashed as he said, "So you are saying that you are acting alone?" "How am I acting alone? There are two of us," Professor Chi said angrily. Wu Lao Air glanced at Tang Zheng and said, "Is bringing a student that useful?" It was clear that he thought that Tang Zheng was an ordinary student. In fact, when Tang Zheng was quiet, he really had a scholarly aura. It was not surprising that Wu Lao Air misjudged him. Professor Chi said with a red face, "What's wrong with two people? Facing a group of grave robbers like you, two people are enough." Ha ha ha, the group of people laughed without restraint. They looked at Professor Chi as if they were looking at an idiot. Tang Zheng had been watching coldly from the side. This Wu Lao Air was not simple. He was waiting to catch this group of people in one fell swoop and then ask about the whereabouts of the ancient tomb. "Professor Chi, you have followed us all the way. You must have heard the news, right? Hee, you've come just in time. This time, even the heavens are helping me. Last time, I wasn't able to enter the center of the ancient tomb. This time, with you and our ample preparations, we will definitely succeed." Second Elder Wu changed the topic and said mysteriously. "What do you mean?" Professor Chi asked righteously. "Of course it's to pull you in. Professor Chi, with your knowledge, after the matter is done, I will give you 10% of the profits. How about it? This is much more money than doing research." Wu Lao Air said temptingly. Professor Chi flew into a rage. This was simply a humiliation to him. He did research to pass down Chinese culture. How was it for money? This group of people was tarnishing his character. He was about to scold them when Tang Zheng grabbed his hand and said, "Professor Chi, 10% of the profits is not a small amount. Aren't we lacking research funds? Won't this solve our problem?" As he said this, he secretly winked at Professor Chi. "Ha, your student is a smart person. A wise man submits to circumstances. In this society, who can't live with money?" Wu Lao Air said with praise. Professor Chi was not an idiot. After seeing this, he immediately understood that Tang Zheng wanted to pretend to join them and then follow them into the ancient tomb. Professor Chi was not a pedantic person. Moreover, with Tang Zheng accompanying him, he was not afraid. He took a deep breath and said as if he had no choice, "All right, but 10% is not enough. 20%. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.